Some women run from monsters in the dark. Leora Vance ran from one who wore a prosecutor's smile. The night she collapsed at Dante Moretti's gates, bleeding and broken, she didn't know she was stumbling into the territory of the city's most feared crime boss. She didn't know he'd open those gates. And she couldn't have known that her desperate escape would ignite a war between two men who controlled the city from opposite sides of the law. One through corruption disguised as justice, the other through power that never pretended to be anything else. If you stay until the end of this story, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far Leora's journey reaches across the world. The storm hit the coast like a fist. Rain slashed sideways through the darkness, turning the narrow road into a river of mud and debris. Lightning cracked across the sky in jagged white scars, illuminating the cliffs that dropped away to the churning ocean below. The wind screamed through the pine trees, bending them nearly horizontal, ripping branches free and hurling them across the pavement. Leora Vance ran through it all, barefoot and bleeding. Her feet slapped against the wet asphalt, each step sending shocks of pain up through her ankles and knees. The thin nightgown she wore clung to her skin, soaked through and nearly transparent, offering no protection against the cold or the cutting rain. Her dark hair whipped across her face, sticking to her cheeks and lips. She couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, couldn't hear anything over the roar of the storm and the thunder of her own heartbeat. But she could see the headlights behind her. They swung around the curve, high and bright, cutting through the rain like searchlights. The engine roared, closing the distance. Leora's lungs burned, her legs shaking with exhaustion, but she forced herself faster. Her bare foot came down on something sharp, glass, a rock, she didn't know, and she cried out, stumbling forward. Her hands hit the ground, palms scraping against gravel. For a moment, she stayed there on her knees, gasping, the world spinning around her. The headlights grew brighter. She pushed herself up and ran. The road curved ahead, following the line of the cliffs. Through the rain, she could barely make out the shape of something massive rising from the darkness. A wall, tall and solid, stretching along the edge of the property. And there, barely visible through the downpour, iron gates. Leora didn't think, she just ran toward them. Her vision blurred. The edges of everything started to go soft and gray. She'd lost too much blood, been running too long. Her body was giving out. But she could see the gates now, closer, closer. Tall black iron worked into intricate patterns, set into stone pillars that rose like sentries on either side. Security cameras perched atop the pillars, their lenses gleaming in the lightning flashes. Behind her, the vehicle skidded to a stop. A car door slammed. "Leora!" The voice cut through the storm, smooth and controlled even as it called her name. Adrian's voice, the voice that had whispered promises in her ear. The voice that had told her she was worthless, that no one would believe her, that she belonged to him. Leora's hands hit the iron gates. She grabbed the bars, tried to shake them, but they were locked solid. She pressed her face against the cold metal, her voice coming out as barely more than a rasp. "Please, please, someone—" The world tilted. Her knees buckled. She heard footsteps splashing through the puddles behind her, measured and unhurried. Adrian didn't need to rush. There was nowhere left for her to go. The gates were locked. The cliffs dropped away on one side. The forest was too thick to navigate in the dark, especially in her condition. He had her cornered, and they both knew it. "Come here, Leora." His voice was closer now, gentle almost. That tone he used when he wanted her to think he was being reasonable, that she was the one being irrational. The tone that came before his hand closed around her throat or his fingers dug into her arms hard enough to leave bruises shaped like his grip. Leora's fingers tightened on the iron bars. She couldn't hold herself up anymore. She sank down, her cheek pressed against the gate, rain streaming over her face. Through her dimming vision, she saw movement on the other side of the gates. Figures emerged from the darkness. 3 men in dark suits, moving with the kind of fluid coordination that spoke of military training. They appeared like ghosts out of the rain, their faces hard and expressionless. One of them raised a hand to the earpiece he wore, speaking into it in a voice too low for Leora to hear over the storm. Behind her, Adrian stopped walking. "This is private property," he called out, his voice taking on that authoritative edge he used in courtrooms. "I'm Adrian Wolfe with the district attorney's office. This woman is mentally ill. She's had an episode and run away from a treatment facility. I'm here to bring her back to safety." Leora tried to speak, to tell them it was a lie, but nothing came out except a choked sound. Her vision was going gray at the edges, tunneling down to just the three men on the other side of the gate. One of them, the one in the center, taller than the others, stepped closer to the bars. He looked down at Leora with dark, unreadable eyes. His gaze traveled over her, the nightgown torn at the shoulder, the bruises on her arms in various stages of healing, the blood on her feet, the way she trembled against the gate. Then he looked past her, at Adrian. The two men locked eyes through the rain, separated by iron and stone. Leora felt the air change, felt something shift in the space between them. It was like watching two apex predators size each other up, each recognizing in the other something dangerous. Adrian's expression remained calm, concerned even. He took a step forward, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. "I know how this looks, but I assure you, sir." One of the security men spoke into his earpiece again, then listened. After a moment, he nodded. "Mr. Moretti says to open the gates." Leora's heart lurched. The world was fading in and out now, coming in pulses of awareness. She felt the vibration through the iron as the gates began to swing inward. Strong hands caught her before she could fall, lifting her with surprising gentleness. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Adrian's voice had lost its smooth edge. "You can't just... She's in my custody. I have legal authority. You have nothing here." The tall man's voice was quiet, but it carried through the storm like a blade. "This is private property. The woman came to our gate seeking refuge. We're providing it. I'm a prosecutor. I know who you are, Mr. Wolf, and you know who owns this property." The man's eyes were flat, emotionless. "Leave now, while I'm still asking politely." For a long moment, Adrian didn't move. Leora could feel his gaze on her, burning with fury barely contained beneath that calm exterior. Then she heard him laugh, a short, cold sound. "This isn't over." "No," the tall man agreed softly. "I don't imagine it is." Adrian's footsteps retreated. A car door opened and slammed. The engine roared to life, and then the headlights swung away, disappearing back down the road. Leora's awareness was fragmenting now, breaking apart like glass. She felt herself being carried, felt the rain stop as they moved under some kind of shelter. There were voices around her, calm, professional, discussing her injuries with clinical detachment. Multiple contusions, various stages of healing, lacerations on both feet, signs of long-term malnutrition. "Get Dr. Chen, now!" That last voice was different from the others, deeper. It carried a weight of authority that made the other voices snap into sharper focus. Leora tried to open her eyes, tried to see who was speaking, but everything was going dark. The last thing she registered before consciousness left her completely was the feeling of being lifted again, held against someone's chest as they climbed stairs. And a voice, that same deep voice, speaking quietly to someone nearby. "Whatever she's running from, it doesn't reach her here. Not tonight. Not ever. Make sure everyone understands that." Then nothing. Leora woke to softness. That was the first thing her mind registered before pain or fear or memory. Just the sensation of something soft beneath her, around her, cradling her exhausted body. Clean sheets, a pillow that smelled like lavender and something else, something subtle and expensive. For a few disoriented seconds, she didn't remember. Didn't remember the storm, the running, the gates. Her mind floated in that space between sleep and waking where nothing had happened yet, where she was just a person lying in a comfortable bed. Then her eyes opened and reality came crashing back. Leora jerked upright with a gasp, her heart hammering. The movement sent pain shooting through her feet and up her legs. She bit back a cry and froze, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar room. It was large, larger than any bedroom she'd been in since childhood. The walls were painted a soft cream color, and tall windows on one side showed gray morning light filtering through heavy curtains. The furniture was elegant but not ostentatious. A dresser made of dark wood, a comfortable chair by the window, a small table with a pitcher of water and a glass. The bed she lay in had 4 posts of carved wood and was piled with pillows and blankets. None of it made sense. Leora looked down at herself. She was wearing clean clothes, soft cotton pajamas that definitely weren't hers. Her hands were bandaged, as were her feet. Someone had cleaned her up, treated her wounds, dressed her in clean clothes while she was unconscious. Panic fluttered in her chest. She pushed the blankets aside and tried to stand, but the moment her feet touched the floor, pain lanced through them, and she collapsed back onto the bed with a hiss. I wouldn't recommend that just yet. Leora's head snapped toward the door, her whole body tensing for a fight or flight that she wasn't capable of in her current state. A woman stood in the doorway, middle-aged, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore simple clothes, a cardigan over a blouse and slacks, and carried herself with calm authority. Her face was kind but firm as she entered the room. "The cuts on your feet are quite deep," the woman continued, setting down a tray she'd been carrying on the table by the bed. Dr. Chen stitched several of them. "You'll need to stay off them for a few days at minimum." Leora pressed herself back against the headboard, her eyes tracking the woman's every movement. "Where am I? Who are you?" "My name is Elena. I manage the household." She poured water from the pitcher into the glass and held it out. When Leora didn't take it, Elena set it on the bedside table within reach. "You're at the Moretti estate. You came to the gates last night during the storm. Mr. Moretti gave instructions that you be cared for." Moretti. The name sent a chill down Leora's spine. Even Adrian had gone silent when that name was spoken at the gates. Everyone in the city knew the name Moretti, even if most people had never seen the man himself. He was a ghost story, a legend, a name spoken in whispers. The crime lord who controlled half the city's underworld from behind the scenes. The man the police couldn't touch because he was too careful, too connected, too dangerous. And Leora had collapsed at his gates. "I need to leave," she said, her voice hoarse. "I need to—" "You're not a prisoner here." Elena's voice was gentle but firm. "The door isn't locked. You can leave whenever you wish. But if you try to walk on those feet right now, you'll tear the stitches and possibly cause permanent damage." Dr. Chen was quite clear about that. Leora's hands clenched in the soft blankets. She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to get up, get out, keep moving. Adrian would come back. He always came back. And now she'd brought trouble to these people's door, whoever they were. "Adrian, the man at the gates last night," Leora said. "He'll come back. He won't let this go." "You don't understand. His father is District Attorney Marcus Wolf," Elena finished calmly. "Yes, we're aware of who Adrian Wolf is and who his father is. Mr. Moretti has already made arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" Leora's voice came out sharper than she intended. "You can't stop him. No one can. He's not here." Elena met her eyes steadily. "Whatever power Adrian Wolf has elsewhere, it doesn't extend past those gates. You're safe here, Miss Vance." The use of her name made Leora freeze. "How do you know my name?" "You were delirious with fever when Dr. Chen was treating you. You said quite a few things." Elena's expression softened slightly. "None of which will be repeated to anyone you don't wish to tell. You have my word on that." Leora didn't know what to say to that. She'd spent so long in a world where every word was recorded, catalogued, used against her later. The idea that someone would keep her secret simply because she wanted them kept seemed impossible. Elena gestured to the tray she'd brought. "There's soup, bread, and tea. You should try to eat something. I'll be back in an hour to change your bandages and help you to the bathroom if you need it." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Miss Vance, this isn't a cage. You're not required to stay in this room. Once you can walk again, the whole estate is open to you. There are no locked doors, no surveillance in the private areas. Mr. Moretti thought you should know that." Then she was gone, pulling the door shut behind her with a soft click. Leora stared at the closed door for a long moment, waiting for the lock to engage. But the only sound was her own breathing and the distant patter of rain against the windows. Slowly, cautiously, she leaned forward and reached for the door handle. Her fingers closed around it. She turned it. The door opened. Leora's breath caught in her throat. She pulled the door shut again, her hand trembling slightly, then opened it once more just to be sure. The hallway beyond was empty, a long corridor with other doors, paintings on the walls, a table with fresh flowers. No locks. No cameras. No Adrian standing guard to tell her when she could and couldn't leave a room. She closed the door and sank back against the pillows, something tight in her chest finally starting to loosen. For the first time in 3 years, she was behind a door that she could open herself. Dante Moretti stood in his office on the 3rd floor of the main house, looking out the tall windows at the storm-battered grounds below. The rain had finally stopped, leaving everything dripping and gray in the early morning light. The ocean beyond the cliffs was still churning, white-capped and violent. He'd been awake all night, but he didn't feel tired. Dante had long ago mastered the art of functioning on minimal sleep. You didn't build an empire, legitimate or otherwise, by keeping regular hours. Behind him, the door opened. He didn't turn. "She's awake," Vincent said. His head of security was a man of few words, which was one of the many reasons Dante valued him. "Elena's with her now." Dante nodded slightly, his gaze still on the ocean. "What did Dr. Chen say?" "Multiple injuries, some weeks old, some fresh. Malnutrition, signs of prolonged psychological stress." Vincent's voice remained neutral, professional. The doctor's exact words were that Miss Vance has been living in a sustained state of trauma for a considerable period of time. Dante's jaw tightened slightly. He'd seen the woman at the gates, seen the bruises, the terror in her eyes. He'd made his decision in that moment without fully thinking it through, something he almost never did. Dante Moretti didn't make impulsive choices. He calculated, planned, considered every angle before moving. But last night, watching that woman collapse against his gates while Adrian Wolfe approached her with that sanctimonious expression, Dante had simply reacted. "Adrian Wolfe called his father last night," Dante said. "It wasn't a question." "Within 10 minutes of leaving the property," Vincent confirmed. "Our sources in the DA's office say Marcus is furious. He's already making calls, trying to find leverage." "He won't find any." Dante turned from the window, his dark eyes cold. The Wolves have spent years building their little empire on corruption and fear. They're not used to people telling them no. Vincent's expression didn't change, but there was a question in his eyes. Dante knew what he was asking without words. Why this woman? Why risk a confrontation with the district attorney's office over a stranger who'd stumbled to their gates? Dante didn't have a good answer. Or rather, he had several answers, none of which fully explained his decision. Part of it was practical. The Wolves had been a thorn in his side for years, not powerful enough to be a real threat, but annoying enough to cause problems. Marcus Wolfe liked to position himself as the city's crusader against corruption while taking bribes from developers and covering up crimes for anyone with enough money or influence. His son was apparently cut from the same cloth, just better at hiding it behind a charming smile. Part of it was strategic. Having something the Wolves wanted, or in this case someone, gave Dante leverage he might be able to use later. But there was another part, a part Dante didn't examine too closely. The part that had seen a terrified woman running barefoot through a storm, seen the bruises on her arms and the desperation in her eyes, and simply couldn't turn her away. "Have Marco look into Adrian Wolfe," Dante said. "I want to know everything. Where he goes, who he talks to, what he eats for breakfast. Everything." "Already done," Vincent said. "Marco started pulling records last night. So far, it's all surface-level clean, exactly what you'd expect from a prosecutor's son. Good schools, clean record, works at his father's firm. But Marco says it's too clean, like someone scrubbed it. Tell him to dig deeper." Dante moved to his desk, pulling up the file that had been delivered that morning. Leora Vance, 26 years old, orphaned at 16, no other family. She disappeared from public records 3 years ago, right around the time Adrian Wolfe would have met her. 3 years. 3 years of whatever had left those bruises on her skin and that haunted look in her eyes. "What do you want to do about the Wolves?" Vincent asked. Dante was quiet for a moment, thinking. The smart move would be to reach out, negotiate. Offer some kind of compromise that would let everyone walk away without escalating things. That's what he would normally do, find the peaceful solution that served his interests while avoiding unnecessary conflict. But when he thought about Adrian Wolfe's voice at the gates last night, calling Leora's name with that possessive edge barely hidden beneath false concern, Dante found he didn't want to negotiate. "Nothing," he said finally. "We do nothing. Miss Vance came to our gates seeking refuge. We provided it. If the Wolves have a problem with that, They're welcome to take it up with my lawyers. Vincent's eyebrows rose slightly, the closest he ever came to showing surprise. That's going to make Marcus very angry. Good. Dante's voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. Let him be angry. Let him make his calls and pull his strings. He'll find that his influence has limits. And if he tries something more direct, then we'll respond accordingly. Dante closed the file on his desk. In the meantime, make sure Miss Vance has everything she needs. And Vincent, I want armed security on this property 24/7 until further notice. If Adrian Wolfe so much as looks at these gates, I want to know about it immediately. Vincent nodded and turned to leave. One more thing, Dante said. Vincent paused. When Miss Vance is ready to talk, if she wants to talk, I'd like to speak with her, but only when she's ready. No pressure, no demands. Make sure Elena understands that. Understood. After Vincent left, Dante stood alone in his office, looking down at the closed file on his desk. Leora Vance. A stranger who'd run to his gates in the middle of a storm and somehow, in the space of a few minutes, turned into a declaration of war against one of the city's most powerful families. Dante should have turned her away, should have called the authorities, stayed neutral, avoided the complication, but he'd opened the gates instead, and now he'd see it through. 3 days passed before Leora felt strong enough to leave the bedroom. Elena came by several times a day, bringing food, changing bandages, helping Leora to the bathroom when the pain in her feet made walking impossible. The older woman never asked questions, never pushed for information Leora wasn't ready to give. She was simply present, calm, steady. It was disorienting in its kindness. On the 4th day, Leora woke to find a pair of soft slippers beside the bed and a note in Elena's neat handwriting. Dr. Chen says you can try short walks today. These should help with the pain. The library is down the hall to the left if you'd like somewhere quiet to sit. Leora stared at the note for a long time. An invitation, not a command. A suggestion, not an order. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the kindness to reveal itself as manipulation, but it never did. She put on the slippers and, leaning heavily on the wall, made her way out into the hallway. The estate was beautiful in a way that didn't announce itself. The furnishings were expensive but not ostentatious, the artwork carefully chosen, the whole place designed with an eye toward comfort rather than display. Leora had grown up wealthy, before her parents died and the money disappeared into legal fees and debts, and she recognized quality when she saw it. But there was something else here too, an absence of the things she'd become accustomed to over the past 3 years. No cameras in the corners, no locks on the inside of the doors, no sense of being watched, monitored, controlled. The library was exactly where Elena had said it would be. Leora pushed open the heavy wooden door and stopped, catching her breath. It was a large room, 2 stories tall, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves covering 3 walls. A spiral staircase led to a second-floor balcony that wrapped around the upper shelves. Tall windows let in the gray afternoon light, and a fire burned low in the fireplace, taking the chill off the air. Deep leather chairs were arranged near the fire, along with a sofa and several small tables. And sitting in one of the chairs, reading a book, was a man Leora had never seen before. She knew immediately who he was. Dante Moretti looked nothing like Adrian. Where Adrian was all golden charm and polished edges, this man was dark intensity and controlled power. He was probably in his early 40s, with black hair touched with gray at the temples, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes so dark they were almost black. He wore simple clothes, dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, but carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he was capable of. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment their eyes met. Leora's first instinct was to run. Her second was to apologize for intruding. Her third was to stand very still and wait to be told what to do. But before she could act on any of those instincts, Dante closed his book and stood. Miss Vance? His voice was quiet, cultured, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't quite place. I'm glad to see you're feeling better. Please, don't let me disturb you. The library is yours to use. He moved toward the door, clearly intending to give her the space. Something about the fact that he was leaving, that he wasn't demanding her attention, or her gratitude, or her explanation, made Leora speak. Wait, Dante paused, turning back to her. He didn't move closer, didn't crowd her space, just waited. Leora swallowed hard. You're Dante Moretti. I am. You saved my life. Something flickered across his expression, too quick to read. I opened a gate. The doctors saved your life. Adrian would have killed me. The words came out flat, certain. Maybe not that night, but eventually. So yes, you saved my life. Dante studied her for a long moment. Leora forced herself to meet his gaze, to not look away even though every instinct told her to show deference, to make herself smaller, to not draw attention. Why? She asked. You don't know me. Adrian is... His father is powerful. Why did you help me? Dante was quiet for so long that Leora thought he might not answer. Then he said simply, Because you asked. Leora blinked. That's it? That's it. He paused. And because Adrian Wolf's voice at my gates, claiming you as his property that needed to be returned, it didn't sit well with me. I'm not his property. The words came out sharp, almost angry. I was never his property. No, Dante agreed softly. You weren't, though I suspect he saw it differently. Leora's hands clenched at her sides. She could feel herself starting to shake, not from fear, but from something else. Rage, maybe. Or just exhaustion from carrying this weight alone for so long. He'll come for me, she said. Adrian won't just let this go. And his father, Marcus Wolf, doesn't lose. He'll find a way to... Miss Vance. Dante's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts, gentle but firm. Adrian Wolf will not reach you here, neither will his father. You have my word on that. You can't promise that. You don't know what they're capable of. I know exactly what they're capable of. There was something cold in Dante's eyes now, something that reminded Leora that this man hadn't built his empire through kindness. And they know what I'm capable of. The difference is, they've spent years hiding behind the law, while I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am. That gives me certain advantages. Leora wanted to believe him, wanted so badly to believe that there was somewhere Adrian couldn't reach her, someone he couldn't manipulate or charm or threaten into giving her back. But 3 years of Adrian's control had taught her not to trust promises. Why are you doing this? She asked again. Really, there has to be a reason, something you want from me. Dante considered the question. Would you believe me if I said there wasn't? No. A small smile touched his lips, the first expression she'd seen on his face that seemed genuinely amused. Fair enough. You're right to be skeptical. In my experience, people rarely do things without expecting something in return. So what do you want? Right now, nothing. You're recovering from trauma. You need time, space, and safety. I'm providing those things because I can and because I choose to. He paused. Later, if you decide you want to tell your story, if you want to fight back against Adrian and his father, then yes, I would help with that. But that's your choice to make, Miss Vance, not mine. Leora searched his face for signs of deception, for the manipulation she'd learned to recognize in Adrian's expressions. But all she saw was a quiet patience and something that might have been understanding. I don't know if I can fight them, she said quietly. I don't know if I have any fight left. You ran through a storm barefoot to escape, Dante said. You collapsed at the gates of a crime lord's estate and lived to tell about it. You have more fight in you than you think. Before Leora could respond, a phone buzzed. Dante pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and his expression went carefully neutral. I need to take this, he said. But Miss Vance? This library is yours whenever you want it, as is the rest of the estate. You're not a prisoner here, you're a guest. He left, pulling the door shut quietly behind him. Leora stood alone in the library, surrounded by thousands of books and the warm crackle of the fire. Slowly, carefully, she made her way to one of the chairs near the fireplace and lowered herself into it. For the first time in 3 years, she was in a room with unlocked doors, no cameras, and no one waiting to tell her what to do next. For the first time in 3 years, she could breathe. And in the quiet safety of that moment, surrounded by books and firelight, Leora Vance finally let herself cry. The tears came hard and fast, 3 years of suppressed grief pouring out of her in wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. Leora pressed her face into her hands, trying to muffle the sounds, but they kept coming. She cried for the girl she'd been before Adrian, bright and hopeful and stupidly trusting. She cried for the years stolen from her, for the bruises that had finally faded only to be replaced by new ones, for every time she'd believed his apologies and promises that things would be different. She cried until there was nothing left, until her throat was raw, and her eyes burned and her chest ached from the force of it. And when the tears finally stopped, she felt hollowed out but somehow lighter, like she'd purged something poisonous that had been festering inside her for too long. The fire had burned down to embers when Leora finally lifted her head. The light through the windows had shifted, afternoon fading toward evening. She wiped her face with her sleeve and took a shaky breath, then another. A soft knock at the door made her tense. "Miss Vance?" Elena's voice, gentle as always. "May I come in?" Leora cleared her throat. "Yes." Elena entered carrying a tray with tea and small sandwiches. She took in Leora's red eyes and tear-stained face without comment, simply setting the tray on the table beside her chair. "I thought you might like something to eat," she said. "You missed lunch." "I'm not hungry." Nevertheless, Elena poured the tea with practiced efficiency. "Dr. Chen says you need to keep your strength up, even if it's just a few bites." Leora accepted the cup of tea, wrapping her hands around its warmth. Elena settled into the chair across from her, her movements unhurried. "How long was I in here?" Leora asked. "A few hours." Elena's gaze was kind. "Long enough for a good cry, I'd say." Leora looked down at her tea. "Does everyone here know my business?" "No one here knows anything you haven't chosen to tell them," Elena said firmly. "But this is a large house, Miss Vance, and these walls have seen their share of tears. There's no shame in it." "I'm not ashamed." The words surprised Leora even as she said them. "I'm just tired. Tired of being the woman who needs saving. Tired of being weak." "Surviving what you've survived doesn't make you weak," Elena said quietly. "It makes you a fighter. There's a difference." Leora wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the times she could have left, should have left, all the moments of cowardice that had kept her trapped. But the words stuck in her throat because somewhere deep down, beneath the self-recrimination and shame, a small part of her wondered if Elena might be right. "Mr. Moretti said I could stay here," Leora said. "Did he mean that?" "He doesn't say things he doesn't mean." Elena stood, smoothing her cardigan. "You're welcome here as long as you need to be. No conditions, no expectations. Though I will insist you eat at least one of those sandwiches before I take the tray back." After Elena left, Leora sat in the growing darkness of the library, sipping tea and picking at the food. The sandwiches were simple but good. Fresh bread, real turkey, crisp lettuce. The kind of meal that spoke of care in its preparation. She ate one, then another, surprised by her own hunger. By the time she finished, full night had fallen outside the windows. Leora stood carefully, testing her feet. They still ached, but the sharp pain had dulled to something more manageable. She made her way back to her room, moving slowly through the quiet hallways. She was almost to her door when she heard voices drifting up from the floor below. One was Dante's, that deep, controlled tone she was starting to recognize. The other was unfamiliar, younger, edged with barely contained anger. "This is insane, Dante. You're risking everything we've built for a woman you don't even know." "Watch your tone, Marco. Someone needs to say it. Marcus Wolf has the entire DA's office on alert. He's called in favors from half the city council. And for what? A domestic dispute that has nothing to do with us?" It stopped being a domestic dispute the moment Adrian Wolf showed up at our gates threatening to take her by force. Dante's voice was calm, but Leora heard steel beneath it. "And it became our business when I decided it was. She's a liability. She's a person who needed help. I provided it. End of discussion." There was a pause, then Marco's voice again, quieter now. "At least tell me you have a plan. Because right now it looks like you're making decisions with your heart instead of your head, and that's not like you." "My plan is to keep her safe until she's strong enough to decide what she wants to do next. If that means making an enemy of Marcus Wolf, so be it. He's been a thorn in our side for years anyway." "A thorn? Yes. Not an all-out war. Then he should have taught his son not to chase terrified women through storms." Footsteps echoed as someone walked away. Leora pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding. She shouldn't be listening to this. She should go to her room, pretend she hadn't heard, stay out of business that clearly didn't concern her. But it did concern her. These men were arguing about her, about the danger she'd brought to their door just by existing in their space. She was a liability. The thought settled in her chest like a stone. She'd spent 3 years being told she was worthless, a burden, that no one would believe her if she tried to tell them what Adrian really was. And now here she was, proving Adrian right by bringing chaos into the lives of strangers who'd shown her nothing but kindness. Leora made it back to her room and closed the door, leaning against it. Her feet throbbed, her head ached, and somewhere in the house below, men were calculating the cost of her safety against the risk of war with one of the city's most powerful families. She should leave. Pack up the few things Elena had provided and slip out before she caused any more trouble. It would be the right thing to do, the selfless thing, but she had nowhere to go. No money, no friends. Adrian hadn't systematically isolated her from, no family to take her in. And even if she did leave, Adrian would find her. He always found her. Leora slid down the door until she was sitting on the floor, her knees drawn up to her chest. She was so tired of running, so tired of being afraid, so tired of having no good choices, only varying degrees of bad ones. She didn't know how long she sat there before another knock came at the door. "Miss Vance?" Dante's voice, quiet through the wood. "May I speak with you?" Leora's first instinct was to pretend she was asleep, but something in his tone, a gentleness that belied the steel she'd heard him use with Marco, made her reach up and turn the handle. Dante stood in the hallway, still in the same clothes from earlier, though he looked more tired now. His eyes went to her sitting on the floor, and something like concern crossed his face. "Are you all right?" "I heard you arguing," Leora said, "with Marco, about me." Dante's jaw tightened slightly. "I apologize. We should have been more discreet. He's right, you know. I am a liability. You should let me go before I cause you any more problems." "Is that what you want? To leave?" Leora opened her mouth to say yes, to do the noble thing and remove herself from the equation, but what came out instead was the truth. "I have nowhere to go." Dante was quiet for a moment, then he held out his hand. "May I help you up? The floor can't be comfortable." Leora hesitated, then took his offered hand. His grip was strong but careful as he helped her to her feet. Once she was standing, he released her immediately, stepping back to give her space. "Marco is my cousin," Dante said. "He's protective of the family business, sometimes to a fault, but his concerns, while valid, aren't yours to carry." "But he's right. Marcus Wolf is powerful, and you're making him an enemy because of me." Marcus Wolf was already an enemy. He just didn't know it yet. Dante moved to the window, looking out at the dark grounds. His office has been a problem for years. Selective prosecution, evidence that mysteriously disappears, witnesses who suddenly recant their testimony. We've suspected corruption for a long time. We just never had proof. And now? Now I have motivation to find it. He turned back to her. "Miss Vance, I want to be clear about something. You are not a burden. You are not a liability. You are a woman who had the courage to run when many others would have stayed, and the strength to survive when survival seemed impossible. That's not weakness. That's the opposite." Leora's throat tightened. "You don't know what I did, what I allowed to happen." "I know that abuse works by convincing its victims that they're complicit in their own suffering," Dante said quietly. "I know that men like Adrian Wolf are experts at breaking people down until they can't see a way out. And I know that the moment you saw an opening, you took it. You ran through a storm in bare feet rather than spend one more night under his control. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." "How do you know so much about this?" Something dark flickered across Dante's expression. "Let's just say I've seen what powerful men can do when they believe they're untouchable. My own father—" He stopped, shook his head. "That's a story for another time. The point is, you're safe here, and you'll remain safe here for as long as you need. Even if it starts a war? Even then." His voice was firm, final. "Now, you should rest. Dr. Chen will be by tomorrow to check on your feet." He turned to leave, but Leora found herself speaking again. Mr. Moretti? Thank you. Not just for opening the gates, but for seeing me. Not as a victim or a problem, just as a person. It's been a long time since anyone did that. Dante's expression softened slightly. My name is Dante, and you're welcome, Leora. The use of her first name, spoken with such casual respect, nearly undid her. She managed a nod, and then he was gone, pulling the door closed behind him. Leora stood alone in her room, something shifting inside her chest. For the first time since she'd collapsed at those gates, she felt the smallest flicker of something that might have been hope. The next morning brought Dr. Chen, a woman in her 50s with gentle hands and a no-nonsense manner. She examined Leora's feet with careful efficiency, making pleased sounds at the healing. You're mending well, she said, replacing the bandages. Another week, and you should be able to walk normally, though I'd recommend staying off them as much as possible for the next few days. I will, Leora promised. Dr. Chen packed up her supplies, then paused. Elena tells me you've been eating better. That's good. But you're still underweight, and your blood work shows some nutritional deficiencies. I'm going to have the kitchen prepare meals specifically for you, high-protein, iron-rich foods. Nothing heavy, but nutritious. That's not necessary. It is if you want to recover properly. Dr. Chen's tone was kind but firm. Your body has been through significant trauma, Miss Vance. It needs fuel to heal. After the doctor left, Leora spent the morning in her room, watching the ocean through her window. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and bright. Seabirds wheeled over the cliffs, their calls carrying on the wind. Around noon, Elena appeared with lunch and a message. Mr. Moretti wondered if you might join him for dinner this evening, she said. Nothing formal. Just a meal in the smaller dining room, but only if you're comfortable with that. Leora's first instinct was to refuse. To stay in the safety of her room, where she didn't have to navigate social interactions or worry about saying the wrong thing. But then she thought about Dante's words last night, about being seen as a person rather than a victim. I'd like that, she said. Elena smiled. Wonderful. I'll come help you dress around 6. I don't need help. Humor me, Elena said gently. Your feet are still healing, and the stairs can be tricky. That evening, wearing a simple dress Elena had provided, soft gray wool that fit surprisingly well, Leora made her way downstairs with Elena's steadying hand on her elbow. The smaller dining room was exactly that. Smaller, more intimate than what Leora imagined the formal dining room must be. A table was set for 2, candles providing warm light, and windows overlooking the ocean. Dante stood when she entered, dressed more casually than before in dark slacks and a sweater. Leora, thank you for joining me. Thank you for inviting me. She settled into the chair he held out for her, hyper-aware of every movement, every word. This was the first real conversation they'd have, the first time she'd have to be more than just a broken woman who'd collapsed at his gates. Elena served the first course, a light soup, and then disappeared, leaving them alone. For a few minutes, they ate in silence. Not uncomfortable exactly, but waited. Leora could feel Dante's gaze on her occasionally, assessing, though not in the way Adrian used to watch her. This was different, careful, respectful. How are your feet? Dante asked finally. Better. Dr. Chen says I'm healing well. That's good. He paused. Elena mentioned you've been spending time in the library. I hope that's all right. You said I could. Of course it's all right. You're welcome anywhere on the estate. He set down his spoon. I only mention it because I noticed you were looking at the Shakespeare collection. Are you a fan? Leora blinked, surprised. Yes, I used to be. Before... She trailed off, not knowing how to explain the before and after of her life. Which is your favorite? The question was so normal, so refreshingly ordinary, that Leora found herself answering honestly. The Tempest. I know it's not the most popular choice, but there's something about the themes of freedom and forgiveness that always resonated with me. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, Dante quoted softly, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. You know it. My mother was an English teacher, Dante said. She insisted I read the classics, even when I would have rather been anywhere else. I hated it at the time, but some of it stuck. Is she? She passed when I was 18. His voice was matter of fact, but Leora heard the old grief beneath it. Cancer. My father followed a year later, though his death was less natural. Leora didn't know what to say to that. Dante seemed to sense her discomfort and changed the subject. Elena tells me you haven't asked for anything. No phone calls? No messages sent out? Is there no one you'd like to contact? Let them know you're safe? The question landed like a stone in Leora's chest. There's no one. Adrian made sure of that. Anyone I was close to before him, he found reasons why I shouldn't talk to them anymore. Old friends from college were bad influences. My mentor from work was inappropriate. My neighbors were gossipy. One by one, he cut everyone out until there was just him. What about work? You mentioned a mentor. I was a graphic designer, freelance mostly, but after I moved in with Adrian, he said I didn't need to work anymore, that he'd take care of everything. Her hands clenched around her napkin. I was so stupid. I thought he was being generous. I didn't realize he was cutting off my escape routes. You weren't stupid, Dante said firmly. You were being manipulated by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot like I made a series of incredibly poor choices that led me to collapse at a stranger's gates in the middle of a storm. And that stranger opened those gates. So perhaps not all your choices were poor. Leora looked up, meeting his eyes. There was something in his gaze, understanding, maybe, or recognition, like he saw not just the broken woman in front of him, but the person she used to be and might be again. Why did you really open the gates? She asked. Marco said you're risking everything. There has to be more to it than just kindness. Dante was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. When I was young, my father ran his business through fear and violence. He believed power came from making people afraid to cross you. My mother, she was the opposite. She believed in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, and using power to create safety rather than fear. Which one were you more like? For a long time, I tried to be like my father. I thought that's what this world required: strength, ruthlessness, the willingness to do whatever was necessary. He paused. But I've learned that true power isn't about making people fear you. It's about choosing when to use your strength and when to show mercy. And when I saw you at those gates, saw the fear in your eyes, and the way Adrian Wolf was stalking toward you like he owned you, I chose mercy. He'll make you regret it. Perhaps, but I'd regret the alternative more. Dante leaned back in his chair. Leora, I want to be honest with you about something. My cousin Marco is already digging into Adrian and his father's background. We're looking for evidence of their corruption, their crimes. If we find it, and I believe we will, I intend to use it. Leora's heart started pounding. Use it how? That depends. If you want to simply disappear, start a new life, somewhere Adrian can never find you, I can arrange that. New identity, new city, financial support until you're on your feet. No strings attached. And if I don't want to disappear? Dante's eyes met hers, dark and steady. Then we fight back. We expose them for what they are. But I need you to understand what that means. It means going public with your story. It means facing Adrian in court, potentially. It means making yourself visible to exactly the people you've been hiding from. The thought made Leora's stomach turn. I can't. I'm not strong enough for that. You're stronger than you think. But strength or not, it's your choice. No pressure, no timeline. You don't have to decide anything tonight, or this week, or even this month. Take whatever time you need. Elena returned then with the main course, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Dante told her about the estate's history, about the gardens that would bloom in spring, about the library's collection that dated back 3 generations. Leora found herself relaxing, even laughing once when Dante described his childhood attempts to sneak books from the forbidden section. It wasn't until she was back in her room that night, lying in the comfortable bed and staring at the ceiling, that Leora let herself truly consider what Dante had offered. A new life, far away from Adrian. Safety. Freedom. Or a chance to fight back. Both options terrified her in different ways. But as she drifted toward sleep, Leora realized something. For the first time in 3 years, she had options at all. For the first time, someone was asking what she wanted instead of telling her what she needed. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Mornings in her room, reading books Elena brought from the library. Afternoons walking the estate grounds as her feet grew stronger, exploring the gardens and the paths along the cliffs. Evenings either alone or occasionally sharing meals with Dante, their conversations growing easier, more natural. She met some of the household staff, the cook, Maria, who fussed over Leora's appetite, the groundskeeper, Thomas, who showed her where the first spring flowers would emerge, Vincent, Dante's head of security, who was all business but not unkind. And slowly, carefully, Leora began to feel almost human again. She was in the library one afternoon, curled up in her favorite chair with a collection of poetry, when Marco entered. She recognized him from his voice. Younger than Dante, probably early 30s, with sharp features and eyes that assessed everything. "Miss Vance," he said, not quite warmly. "I'm Marco Moretti, Dante's cousin." "I know who you are." Leora set down her book. "You think I'm a liability." Marco's eyebrows rose slightly. "You heard that conversation. Walls are thinner than you think." He studied her for a moment, then surprised her by sitting in the chair across from hers. "I apologize for that. I was out of line." "Were you? Or were you just saying what everyone else was thinking?" "Both, probably." Marco leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Look, I'm not going to pretend this situation isn't complicated. But Dante's made his position clear and I respect that. So I wanted to talk to you directly." "About what?" "About what we've found." He pulled out a tablet, swiped through several screens. "I've been digging into Adrian Wolf's background, his connections, his patterns, and I found some things you should know about." Leora's hands tightened on her book. "What kind of things?" "You weren't the first." Marco turned the tablet toward her. On the screen was a photo of a young woman, maybe 25, with long blonde hair and a bright smile. Her name was Cassidy Morrison. She dated Adrian 6 years ago, before you. Relationship lasted about 18 months, then she disappeared. Disappeared? Officially, she moved to Seattle for a job opportunity, but I tracked her digital footprint. No social media activity after the move, no employment records, no lease agreements. It's like she vanished. Leora stared at the photo, her chest tight. "You think Adrian?" "I don't know, but there's a pattern. Before Cassidy, there was another woman, and before her, another. All young, all isolated from their support systems, all either disappeared or ended up in psychiatric facilities after the relationships ended. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thin." Leora set down her book with shaking hands. "How many?" "That I've found so far? 5, including you. But Miss Vance, Leora, you're the first one who got away while you were still you. The others were either gone or so broken by the time they escaped that no one believed their stories." "Why are you telling me this?" Marco's expression softened slightly. "Because Dante said this was your choice, whether to fight back or disappear. But I think you should have all the information before you decide. Adrian Wolf isn't just an abusive boyfriend. He's a predator with a pattern, and his father has been covering it up for years." Leora stood abruptly, her legs shaky. She moved to the window, looking out at the ocean without really seeing it. 5 women. 5 lives destroyed or ended because of Adrian. And she'd been number 6. Would have been another casualty if not for that storm, those gates, Dante's inexplicable choice to help her. "What happened to the others?" she asked quietly. "The ones who didn't disappear?" 2 are in long-term psychiatric care. One recanted her abuse allegations and moved to another state. We're still trying to track her down. One committed suicide 6 months after leaving Adrian. The last one hit Leora like a physical blow. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, fighting back nausea. "There might be more," Marco continued. "These are just the ones I could find with clear connections to Adrian. But his father's influence runs deep. He's been scrubbing records, paying off witnesses, making problems disappear for decades." "Why?" Leora turned to face him. "Why would a father protect his son knowing what he's doing?" "Because men like Marcus Wolf believe image is everything. A scandal involving his son would damage his political ambitions, his reputation. So he covers it up, buries it, makes it go away." Marco stood, tucking his tablet back into his jacket. "I'm sorry to dump this on you, but I thought you deserved to know what you're up against if you decide to fight." After Marco left, Leora sank back into her chair, her mind reeling. 5 women. Maybe more. A pattern of abuse enabled by corruption and covered up by one of the city's most powerful men. She'd spent 3 years believing she was alone in this, that her suffering was unique, that somehow she'd brought it on herself. But now she knew the truth. She was just one in a line of victims, part of a systematic pattern of predation that had been going on for years. The question was, what was she going to do about it? Leora didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, Marco's words echoing in her mind. 5 women. A pattern. A father who protected his monster of a son because reputation mattered more than justice. By the time dawn light crept through her windows, she'd made her decision. She found Dante in his office, standing at the window with a cup of coffee, looking out at the ocean. He turned when she knocked, his expression shifting from surprise to concern when he saw her face. "Leora, are you all right?" "No." She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "But I will be. I need to talk to you about what Marco told me yesterday." Dante set down his coffee. "He showed you what he found." 5 women, Dante. 5 that you know about. And I'm supposed to just run away and let it keep happening? Let Adrian find number 7 and 8 and 9? Her voice was shaking, but not from fear, from rage. "I can't do that. I won't." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to fight back. I want to expose them, Adrian and his father both. I want everyone to know what they are." She crossed to stand in front of his desk, her hands clenched at her sides. "You said it was my choice. This is my choice." Dante studied her for a long moment. "Do you understand what you're committing to? This won't be easy. The Wolves will use every resource they have to destroy your credibility. They'll dig into your past, twist your words, paint you as unstable or vindictive or both. And that's assuming we can even get enough evidence to make charges stick." "I know, but Marco found those other women. If we can find them, get them to testify." "We've been trying." "The ones in psychiatric facilities can't be contacted without legal guardians' permission. And those guardians are all connected to the Wolves somehow. The one who moved out of state isn't answering calls. And the ones who disappeared..." Dante's jaw tightened. "We're still looking." Leora felt something crack inside her chest. "So we have nothing." "We have you. We have your testimony, your evidence. The bruises may have faded, but Dr. Chen documented everything when you arrived. The malnutrition, the old fractures, the psychological trauma. It's a start. A start that ends with my word against a prosecutor's son." Leora sank into the chair across from his desk. "Adrian's charming, respected. Everyone loves him. Who's going to believe me?" "More people than you think." Dante came around the desk, leaning against it to face her. "But Leora, I need you to be certain about this. Once we start down this path, there's no going back. The Wolves will come at you with everything they have. They already took everything from me. What more can they do? They can try to take your freedom, your sanity, your future." His voice was gentle but firm. "I've seen what powerful men do when they're cornered. It won't be pretty. Then we corner them so completely they can't fight back." Leora met his eyes. "You said you were looking for evidence of their corruption. What have you found?" Dante was quiet for a moment, then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Marco, can you come to my office? Bring everything you have on the Wolves." 10 minutes later, Marco entered carrying a leather folder stuffed with documents. He looked between Dante and Leora, his expression unreadable. "She wants in," Dante said simply. Marco's eyebrows rose. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure," Leora said before Dante could answer for her. "Show me what you have." Marco spread documents across Dante's desk. Printouts of bank records, email chains, court filings, photographs. The Wolves have been running a protection racket disguised as legal services for at least 15 years. Marcus uses his position as DA to threaten business owners. Then his private law firm swoops in to help them, for a price. If they don't pay, charges get filed, evidence mysteriously appears, witnesses come forward. "That's extortion," Leora said. "It is, but proving it is another matter. Most of the victims are too scared to testify. The paper trail is buried under shell companies and offshore accounts, and anyone who's tried to investigate has found themselves suddenly reassigned or fired or worse." "What about Adrian? What's his role in all this? Marco pulled out another set of documents. Adrian's the clean face. He doesn't get his hands dirty with the business side. Instead, he targets vulnerable women, usually ones with some money or connections that could be useful. He isolates them, controls them, and when he's done, his father makes them disappear. Sometimes, literally. Leora's stomach churned. The women who vanished, you think they're dead? I think they knew too much and became liabilities. Marco's voice was flat, clinical. Cassidy Morrison, the blonde from the photo I showed you, she had a trust fund. 3 months after she moved to Seattle, that trust fund was liquidated. The money went into an account that traces back to one of Marcus's shell companies. That's murder, Leora breathed. That's what we suspect. But suspicion isn't proof. We need bodies, or witnesses, or a paper trail that directly links the Wolves to these disappearances. And we need it all to be airtight, because the moment we move against them, they'll use every legal trick in the book to shut us down. Dante had been quiet during this exchange, watching Leora carefully. Now he spoke. There might be another way. Both Leora and Marco turned to look at him. We've been approaching this like a legal case, Dante continued, building evidence, planning for court, but men like Marcus Wolf don't fall in courtrooms. They fall in the court of public opinion. What are you suggesting? Marco asked. A scandal. Something so public, so undeniable, that even Marcus's connections can't bury it. Dante's eyes were dark, calculating. In 3 weeks, the city is hosting its annual Justice Gala. It's a fundraiser for victims' rights organizations hosted by the DA's office. Every judge, politician, and media outlet in the city will be there, including Adrian and his father. Leora's heart started pounding. You want to expose them there. I want to give you the platform to expose them yourself, in front of everyone who matters, with cameras rolling and reporters present. They can bury a police report or intimidate a witness, but they can't bury a live confession broadcast to the entire city. That's insane, Marco said, but there was a gleam in his eye that suggested he was already considering the logistics. Security at that gala will be intense, and even if we get Leora in, the moment she starts talking, they'll shut her down. Not if we do it right. Dante stood, pacing now, his mind clearly working through the plan. We need evidence they can't refute. Video testimony from the other victims. Documents proving the financial crimes. Medical records. Everything laid out so clearly that even if they drag her off the stage, the damage is already done. The victims won't talk, Marco said. We've tried. They wouldn't talk to you, Leora said quietly. Both men looked at her. They wouldn't talk to investigators or lawyers or strangers. But they might talk to me. To someone who survived the same thing they did. Leora, Dante started, but she cut him off. I know it's dangerous. I know Adrian will be watching for any sign of me. But if I could reach just one of them, get one woman to tell her story, she looked between the two men. We find Cassidy Morrison's family, the woman in the psychiatric facility, anyone who might still have evidence or be willing to speak, and I'll talk to them. Marco shook his head. Adrian has people looking for you. The moment you surface, he'll know. Then we make sure I surface in a way he can't touch. Leora's mind was racing now, the first real plan forming. What about the woman who recanted her testimony, the one who moved out of state? Her name is Mara Quinn, Marco said, pulling up a file on his tablet. She accused Adrian of assault 3 years ago, made it all the way to filing charges before she suddenly withdrew everything and left town. Last known address is Portland, but she's not responding to calls or emails. I'll go to Portland. The words were out before Leora fully thought them through, but once she said them, she knew it was right. I'll find her. Talk to her face to face. Absolutely not, Dante said, his voice firm. You're not strong enough for that kind of journey, and it's too dangerous. If Adrian finds out, he won't, not if we're careful. Leora turned to Marco. You have contacts, right? People who can help me travel without being tracked? I do, but then that's what we'll do. I'll go to Portland, find Mara Quinn, and convince her to help us. While I'm doing that, you two work on getting the other evidence we need. Dante moved to stand in front of her, his expression intense. Leora, listen to me. I know you want to fight, and I admire that. But this is moving too fast. You've been here less than 2 weeks. Your feet are barely healed. You're not ready for... I'm ready for whatever it takes to make sure Adrian doesn't do this to anyone else. Leora's voice was steady, certain. You told me I was stronger than I thought. Let me prove it. For a long moment, Dante just looked at her. Then he turned to Marco. Can you keep her safe if she does this? Marco's expression was serious. I can arrange secure transport, provide protection, monitor for any sign that the wolves are tracking her. But Dante, if this goes wrong, then we deal with it. But the lady has made her choice. Dante looked back at Leora. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Something shifted in Dante's expression. Pride, maybe? Or respect? Then we do it your way. Marco, make the arrangements. I want her protected every step of the way. Best people, secure locations, no chances taken. When do we leave? Leora asked. 2 days, Marco said. That gives me time to set everything up and gives you time to prepare. And Leora, if at any point you change your mind, if this becomes too much, you say the word and we pull you out immediately. Understood? Understood. After Marco left to make arrangements, Leora found herself alone with Dante again. The adrenaline that had carried her through the conversation was starting to fade, leaving behind a flutter of nervousness. Thank you, she said quietly, for believing I could do this. I told you, you're stronger than you think. Dante moved closer, his voice gentle. But Leora, I need you to promise me something. If you find yourself in over your head, if Adrian gets too close or if this becomes too dangerous, you'll walk away. Your safety matters more than revenge. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. Justice and revenge often look the same from the inside, Dante said. Just promise me you'll be careful. I promise. Leora hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at her. Why are you doing all this? Really? You've given me shelter, protection, resources. You're planning to go up against one of the most powerful families in the city. For me, why? Dante was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost vulnerable. When I was 17, my mother tried to leave my father. She'd finally had enough of his violence, his control. She packed a bag, took me and my sister, and ran. We made it as far as the train station before his men found us. Leora's breath caught. He dragged her back, beat her in front of us to make a point about what happened to people who tried to leave him. My sister and I were too young, too weak to stop it. And 2 years later, when my mother finally found the courage to try again, she made sure we weren't home when she did it. She drove off a bridge rather than let him catch her again. Dante. So when I ask myself why I'm doing this, why I'm risking everything for a woman I barely know, the answer is simple. Because I couldn't save my mother, but maybe I can help save you. And maybe, if we stop the wolves, we save whoever would have been next. He met her eyes. That's reason enough for me. Leora felt tears prickling at her eyes. Without thinking, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Dante stiffened for just a moment. Then his arms came around her, holding her gently. I'm sorry about your mother, she whispered. I'm sorry about what you've been through. His voice was rough. But we're going to make it right. Together. They stood like that for a long moment before Leora pulled back, wiping her eyes. I should go prepare. 2 days isn't much time. Elena will help you with whatever you need. And Leora? Be careful in Portland. Mara Quinn might not want to relive her trauma. Don't push if she's not ready. I won't. I just need her to know she's not alone anymore. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Marco provided Leora with a new phone. Untraceable, he assured her, and went over security protocols. Elena helped her pack light, practical clothes. Dr. Chen gave her a final checkup and declared her feet healed enough for travel, though she cautioned against overdoing it. Vincent briefed her on basic security measures. You see anyone watching you, anyone who makes you uncomfortable, you call Marco immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself. I understand. And if you see Adrian or anyone connected to him, you run. Don't think, don't hesitate, just run and call for help. The thought of seeing Adrian again made Leora's skin crawl, but she forced herself to nod. I will. The morning of her departure, Leora stood in her room, the room that had become her sanctuary over the past 2 weeks, and looked around one last time. She'd arrived here broken and terrified. She was leaving still scared, still healing, but with purpose, with hope. A knock at the door made her turn. Dante entered, carrying a small box. I wanted to give you this before you left, he said, handing it to her. Leora opened it to find a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm. A lighthouse. A lighthouse guides people home, Dante said quietly. No matter how lost they are, no matter how dark the storm. This estate is your home now, for as long as you need it. This is to remind you that you always have a safe harbor to return to. Leora's throat tightened. She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, the metal cool against her skin. Thank you for everything. Come back safe, Dante said. That's all the thanks I need. Marco drove her to a private airfield where a small plane waited. The pilot was one of Marco's people, ex-military, Marco explained, completely trustworthy. They'd fly to Portland, where another of Marco's contacts would meet them with a car and take Leora to a safe house. I'll be monitoring communications the whole time, Marco said as they walked across the tarmac. Anything feels wrong, you call. Day or night, doesn't matter. I will. But Leora turned to look back at the car where Dante stood watching. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of his concern. He cares about you, Marco said, following her gaze. I've known Dante my whole life, and I've never seen him take a risk like this for anyone. Whatever happens, don't make him regret it. I'll try my best. The flight to Portland was smooth and uneventful. Leora spent most of it staring out the window, watching the landscape change below her, trying not to think about what she was about to do. She'd never been good at confrontation, had spent 3 years avoiding anything that might set Adrian off, and now she was actively seeking out one of his other victims to dredge up painful memories. What if Mara refused to talk? What if she'd moved on and didn't want to revisit her trauma? What if Adrian had damaged her so badly that she couldn't help even if she wanted to? The questions circled in Leora's mind until they landed in Portland and transferred to the waiting car. The driver was a woman in her 40s named Sarah, calm, professional, asking no questions. She drove Leora to a modest apartment building in a quiet neighborhood and handed her a key. Top floor, apartment 4C. It's clean, secure, and stocked with everything you need. The address for Mara Quinn is in the folder on the kitchen table, along with a burner phone and cash. Marco says to wait until tomorrow to make contact. Give yourself time to rest and plan your approach. But Leora couldn't wait. The moment Sarah left, she grabbed the folder and studied the information Marco had compiled. Mara Quinn lived in a small house on the outskirts of Portland. She worked as a librarian at the local community college. No social media presence, no listed phone number. She'd made herself invisible. Leora understood that impulse intimately. Against every instruction Marco had given her, Leora found herself walking to the address that evening. It was a risk, she knew that. But something told her that if she waited, if she gave herself time to overthink it, she'd lose her nerve. The house was small but well kept, with flower boxes in the windows and a tidy front yard. Leora stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, gathering her courage. Then she walked up to the door and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time. Mara? My name is Leora Vance. I need to talk to you. It's about Adrian Wolfe. The silence stretched so long that Leora thought no one was home. She was about to turn away when she heard the sound of locks being undone. The door opened a crack, a chain still in place, and a woman's face appeared in the gap. Mara Quinn looked older than her 30 years. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her face pale and drawn. But it was her eyes that struck Leora. They held the same haunted quality Leora saw in her own reflection. Who are you? Mara's voice was barely above a whisper. My name is Leora. I was with Adrian for 3 years. I escaped 2 weeks ago. Leora kept her voice gentle, non-threatening. I know what he did to you. I know you tried to press charges and had to recant. I'm not here to cause trouble or dredge up the past. I'm here because I want to stop him from doing this to anyone else. Mara's eyes widened. You need to leave. If he finds out you talk to me. He won't, I promise. I'm being careful. Leora took a small step closer. Please, Mara. I just need 5 minutes. If you want me to leave after that, I will. For a long moment, Mara just stared at her. Then slowly, she undid the chain and opened the door. The house was neat but sparse, like someone who is ready to run at a moment's notice. Mara led Leora to a small living room and sat on the edge of the couch, her body tense. How did you find me? Mara asked. I have help. People who are investigating Adrian and his father. We found records of your case, traced you here. Leora sat across from her, keeping distance between them. I'm sorry to show up like this. I know how frightening it must be. Frightening doesn't begin to cover it. Mara's hands twisted in her lap. I spent 2 years looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to find me. I changed my name, my appearance, everything, and you just show up at my door. I understand if you're angry. I'm not angry. I'm terrified. Mara's voice cracked. Do you have any idea what Marcus Wolf is capable of? What he did to make me recant my testimony? Tell me. Mara was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. He had pictures of my younger sister. She was 16 at the time. He showed them to me, her walking home from school, at the mall with friends, sleeping in her bedroom. He said accidents happen to young girls all the time, that it would be a shame if something happened to her because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. Leora felt sick. So you recanted. What choice did I have? I dropped the charges, signed an NDA, took their money, and disappeared. I haven't spoken to my family in 3 years because I'm afraid that if Adrian or his father find out I'm in contact with them, they'll use them against me again. Tears streamed down Mara's face. I gave up everything to keep my sister safe, and now you're here asking me to what? Testify again? Put her in danger all over again? No. Leora leaned forward, her voice urgent. I'm asking you to help me build a case so airtight that Marcus Wolf can't threaten anyone ever again. We're going to expose them publicly, in front of the entire city. Once that happens, they'll be too busy trying to save themselves to hurt anyone else. That's insane. They'll destroy you. They've already destroyed me. But I'm still here, and I'm still fighting. And I know there are others, women Adrian hurt, women his father silenced. If we stand together, there is no we. Mara stood abruptly, pacing. I'm sorry for what happened to you, truly. But I can't help you. I won't risk my sister's safety for revenge. This isn't about revenge. It's about making sure there's no next victim. No more Cassidy Morrisons or women who disappear. No more girls threatened into silence. At Cassidy's name, Mara froze. You know about Cassidy? I know Adrian dated her before you. I know she disappeared after their relationship ended. And I know her trust fund was liquidated and the money ended up in Marcus Wolf's accounts. Mara sank back onto the couch, her face ashen. Cassidy was my friend. We met in a support group after we'd both left Adrian. She was the one who convinced me to press charges, who said we could stop him together, and then Mara's voice broke. They killed her, didn't they? We don't have proof, but yes, we think so. I can't. Mara shook her head violently. I can't go through this again. I'm sorry, but I can't. Leora reached into her bag and pulled out a card with Marco's contact information. I understand, but if you change your mind, if you decide you want to help, call this number. We're planning something for the Justice Gala in 2 weeks. It's going to be public, undeniable, and final. If you want to be part of ending this, the door is open. She stood to leave, then paused. Mara, I need you to know something. What Adrian did to you, what his father did. None of that was your fault. You survived. You protected your sister. That took courage most people don't have. Courage? Mara's laugh was bitter. I ran away and hid. You stayed alive. Sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do. Leora left the card on the table and walked to the door. She was reaching for the handle when Mara spoke again. The gala. What are you planning? Leora turned back. To tell the truth, all of it. In front of everyone who matters, with evidence they can't refute and testimony they can't silence. They'll tear you apart. Probably. But at least I'll go down fighting instead of hiding. Leora met Mara's eyes. You don't have to decide now. Just think about it. Think about Cassidy and all the others. Think about the next girl Adrian targets. She left then, walking back through the quiet Portland streets to her safe house. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marco asking if she'd made contact. She sent back a simple yes, then collapsed onto the couch and let herself feel the weight of what she'd just done. She'd found Mara Quinn. She'd looked into the eyes of another survivor and seen her own pain reflected back. And now all she could do was wait and hope that sometimes the need for justice was stronger than the fear that kept you silent. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Dante. How did it go? Leora stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I don't know, but I found her. That's something." "That's everything," came his reply. "You gave her a choice. The rest is up to her." Leora looked down at the lighthouse bracelet on her wrist, running her finger over the charm. Somewhere across the country, in an estate perched on coastal cliffs, was a man who'd opened his gates to a stranger and offered her something she'd thought she'd lost forever: hope. She wasn't going to waste it. Whatever happened next, whether Mara decided to help or not, Leora was seeing this through. For herself. For Cassidy Morrison. For every woman who'd suffered at Adrian Wolf's hands and been silenced by his father's corruption. The war had begun. And this time, Leora wasn't running. 3 days passed with no word from Mara. Leora remained in Portland, following Marco's instructions to stay low and avoid patterns. She changed coffee shops daily, never walked the same route twice, kept her hair tucked under a baseball cap whenever she went out. The precautions felt excessive until she remembered Adrian's resources, his father's connections, the machinery of power that had silenced so many before her. On the fourth morning, her burner phone rang. Unknown number. Leora's heart hammered as she answered. "Hello? It's Mara." The voice was tight, strained. "I need to see you, today. There's a park on Laurelhurst. Do you know it?" "I can find it. 1 hour. Come alone." The line went dead. Leora immediately called Marco. "Mara wants to meet. Is it safe?" "I'll have people in the area, but at a distance. If this is a trap." "It's not." I could hear it in her voice. She's scared, but she wants to help. "Your instincts have kept you alive this long. Trust them. But Leora, keep your phone on. One word from you and we extract you immediately." The park was beautiful in the late morning light. All green lawns and towering trees, joggers and dog walkers creating a sense of normalcy that felt almost foreign to Leora now. She found Mara sitting on a bench near a pond, feeding ducks with trembling hands. Leora sat beside her, not speaking, just watching the water ripple as ducks fought over breadcrumbs. "I didn't sleep for 3 days, Mara said finally. "Kept thinking about what you said. About Cassidy. About the next girl." She crumbled bread between her fingers. "I called my sister yesterday. First time in 3 years. Didn't tell her why, just needed to hear her voice." "How is she?" "She's getting married next summer. To a good man, she says. Someone kind." Mara's voice cracked. "And I realized that I've spent 3 years letting Marcus Wolf control my life, even from a distance. He made one threat, and I gave him everything, my family, my home, my voice, and he's probably forgotten I even exist. But you haven't forgotten." "No." Mara finally looked at Leora, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. "I haven't forgotten, and I'm tired of being afraid." She pulled a USB drive from her pocket. "I kept records. Everything from my time with Adrian. Text messages, emails, photos of bruises, medical records from the hospital visits he'd explain away as accidents. I was going to use them for the trial, but when I recanted, I couldn't bring myself to destroy them." Leora's breath caught. "Mara, there's more. I recorded my conversation with Marcus Wolf when he threatened me. I was wearing a wire because my lawyer suggested it, thought we might need protection. I've held on to it all this time like some kind of insurance policy, but I never had the courage to use it." She pressed the drive into Leora's hand. "Until now." "Are you sure? Once we use this, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure." Mara stood, brushing crumbs from her lap. "I'm not strong enough to stand on a stage and tell my story, but this I can do. Use it. Burn them to the ground." She started to walk away, then turned back. "One more thing. There's a woman. Her name is Dr. Sarah Chen. No relation to your doctor. She runs a psychiatric facility about an hour north of here. 2 of Adrian's victims are in her care. She knows what happened to them, knows the Wolves paid for their placement to keep them quiet. She's been looking for a way to help them for years. Will she talk to me? I called her this morning, told her you might reach out. She's expecting you." Mara handed Leora a slip of paper with an address. "Leora, thank you for being brave enough to start this. Maybe by the time you're done, women like us won't have to run anymore." After Mara left, Leora sat on the bench for a long time, the USB drive clutched in her hand. She'd come to Portland hoping for a maybe, a possibility. Instead, she'd found ammunition. She called Marco. I need transport to Evergreen Heights Psychiatric Facility. And Marco, tell Dante we have evidence. Real, documented, undeniable evidence. The facility was nothing like the sterile institutions Leora had imagined. It sat on wooded grounds, more like a retreat center than a hospital, all natural light and calming colors. Dr. Sarah Chen met her in the lobby, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Miss Vance, Mara called ahead. Please come to my office. They walked through quiet hallways past common rooms where patients read or played cards or simply stared out windows. Dr. Chen's office was lined with books, a large window overlooking gardens where more patients wandered under the supervision of staff. I need to be direct with you, Dr. Chen said once they were seated. What you're asking me to do violates patient confidentiality. Even with the best intentions, I could lose my license. I understand, and I wouldn't ask if there was any other way. But these women are victims who were silenced and institutionalized when they tried to speak out. Yes, I'm aware. Dr. Chen pulled 2 files from her desk. Emily Sutton and Rebecca Glass, both admitted 3 years ago after what their intake papers describe as psychotic breaks. Both were seeing Adrian Wolfe before their admissions, and both had their care paid for in advance by a trust established through Marcus Wolfe's law firm. What really happened to them? Emily tried to go to the police. She filed a report about Adrian's abuse, documented everything. The next day, she was picked up by officers claiming she'd threatened to harm herself. By the time I saw her, she'd been given enough sedatives to make her genuinely unstable. Her family, believing the police reports, signed commitment papers. Dr. Chen's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Rebecca's story is similar. She tried to leave Adrian and he convinced her family she was having a breakdown. They institutionalized her for her own protection. Can they testify? Emily is lucid most days. She'd be capable of giving testimony if she chose to. Rebecca is more fragile, but she has moments of clarity. Dr. Chen leaned forward. But Miss Vance, you need to understand what you'd be asking of them. These women have been here for 3 years. They've been told by everyone, their families, their doctors, the legal system, that they're unreliable, that their memories can't be trusted, asking them to relive their trauma, to stand up against the men who put them here. I know. Leora's voice was quiet. Believe me, I know exactly what I'm asking, but they deserve the chance to decide for themselves whether they want to fight back. Dr. Chen studied her for a long moment. You're different from what I expected. Mara described you as determined, but I see something else. You're angry. Furious, Leora admitted. I spent 3 years being told I was crazy, that I was making things up, that I deserved what happened to me. And then I find out there are women locked away, their whole lives stolen, because they dared to speak the truth about Adrian Wolfe. So yes, I'm angry. Angry enough to burn down everything the Wolfes have built. Good. Dr. Chen stood. Anger can be a powerful motivator for change. Come with me. I'll introduce you to Emily, but the decision to help is hers alone. Emily Sutton was in the garden, sitting on a bench and drawing in a sketchbook. She was thin, almost fragile-looking, with long dark hair and eyes that seemed older than her 28 years. She looked up as Dr. Chen and Leora approached, her expression wary. Emily, this is Leora Vance. She'd like to talk with you, if you're willing. Emily's gaze fixed on Leora with unnerving intensity. You're the one Mara mentioned, the woman who got away from Adrian. Yes. And now you want to take him down? It wasn't a question. I do, but I can't do it alone. I need help from women who know the truth about what he is. Emily laughed, a brittle sound. The truth? I told the truth. It got me locked up and labeled insane. My own parents think I'm delusional. Why would anyone believe me now? Because this time, you won't be alone. This time, we have evidence, documentation, other witnesses. This time, we're not asking permission or waiting for the system to protect us. We're taking the fight directly to them. Leora sat on the bench beside her. In 10 days, there's a gala at the Grandview Hotel. Every important person in the city will be there, including Adrian and his father. I'm going to walk in and tell my story in front of all of them, with cameras rolling and reporters watching. They can call me crazy, but they can't stop the story from getting out. That's suicide, Emily said flatly. Marcus Wolfe will destroy you. He'll try, but I'm not giving him the chance to do it quietly. Everything will be public, documented, undeniable. And if you're willing to add your voice to mine, if you're willing to show the world what the Wolves did to you. Leora pulled out her phone, showed Emily the photos Marco had compiled, Cassidy Morrison, Mara Quinn, the others. You could help save the next woman they target. Emily stared at the photos, her hands beginning to shake. I knew Cassidy. We were in the same support group before she disappeared. And Mara, I met her once. Adrian introduced us at some party, probably got off on having two of his victims in the same room without us knowing. Her voice dropped. Is Cassidy really dead? We believe so. We just can't prove it yet. Then prove it. Prove all of it. Emily's eyes hardened. I'll testify. I'll tell everyone exactly what Adrian did and how his father covered it up. I don't care if my family disowns me all over again. I don't care if I spend the rest of my life in this place. At least I'll know I tried to stop him. Relief flooded through Leora. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait and see if we survive this first. Emily closed her sketchbook. What do you need from me? A video testimony, recorded here with Dr. Chen as a witness. You don't have to go to the gala in person. I know that would be too much. But we'll play your testimony on the screens. Let everyone see what the Wolves are capable of. When? Tomorrow, if possible. We don't have much time. Emily nodded. Tomorrow, then. Dr. Chen, will you help? Of course. Dr. Chen's voice was gentle. And Emily? For what it's worth, I've always believed you. I've just never had the power to do anything about it until now. They spent the next hour planning the testimony, going over what Emily felt comfortable sharing. By the time Leora left the facility, she had commitments from both Emily and Rebecca Glass, who'd listened to their conversation from nearby and quietly asked to be included. Marco picked her up at the gates, his expression unreadable as she slid into the car. 2 more witnesses, she told him, and recorded evidence from Mara. How's Dante doing on his end? He's been busy. Marco pulled onto the highway. He tracked down Cassidy Morrison's family. Her parents are willing to talk about her disappearance, about the trust fund. And he's got forensic accountants tearing through the Wolf's financial records. We've found at least 15 shell companies tied to Marcus's extortion schemes. Is it enough? It's a start. But Leora, I need to tell you something. Marco's tone shifted, became more serious. Adrian knows you're alive. Leora's blood ran cold. How? We're not sure. But 3 days ago, someone started making inquiries, asking about a woman matching your description, checking hospitals and shelters along the coast. They haven't found you yet, but they're looking. Does he know about Portland? No, we've been careful to cover your tracks, but we need to get you back to the estate soon. It's not safe for you to be exposed like this much longer. Not yet. I need 1 more day to record the testimonies with Emily and Rebecca. Then I'll come back. Marco's jaw tightened, but he nodded. 1 more day. But Leora, if anything feels wrong, if you see anything suspicious, you call me immediately. Adrian's not just looking for you, he's hunting you. And men like him don't stop until they get what they want. That night, alone in her safe house, Leora lay awake listening to every creak and groan of the building. She kept thinking about Marco's words. Adrian was hunting her. Part of her wanted to run, to get on the next plane back to the estate and hide behind those iron gates until this was all over. But another part of her, the part that had been growing stronger since the night she collapsed in the rain, refused to back down. She'd spent 3 years being hunted, being prey. It was time to become the hunter. Her phone buzzed. Dante. Marco told me about Adrian. Come home. Leora stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She could almost see him in her mind, standing at his office window, looking out at the ocean, worried about a woman he barely knew but had chosen to protect anyway. 1 more day, she typed back. Then I'll come home. I promise. The response came quickly. Be safe. I'll be waiting. The next morning, Leora returned to the psychiatric facility with a video camera Marco had provided. Doctor. Chen had arranged for a private room, neutral and calm, where Emily and Rebecca could record their testimonies without pressure. Emily went first. She sat in a simple chair, hands folded in her lap, and looked directly into the camera. My name is Emily Sutton. 3 years ago, I was in a relationship with Adrian Wolf. At first, he was charming, attentive, everything I thought I wanted. But slowly, He began to isolate me from my friends and family. He'd criticize my choices, tell me I was being paranoid when I questioned him, convince me that I needed him because I wasn't stable enough to function on my own. Her voice was steady, matter of fact, but Leora could see her hands trembling slightly. The abuse started small. A shove during an argument, squeezing my arm hard enough to bruise. But it escalated. By the end, I was afraid to speak without permission, afraid to leave the apartment, afraid of what he'd do if I tried to get help. When I finally found the courage to go to the police, I thought I'd be protected. Instead, within 24 hours, I was arrested for making threats against myself. I was sedated, institutionalized, and my family was told I was having a psychotic break. I've been here ever since, labeled as unreliable and delusional, while Adrian Wolfe walks free. She paused, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But I'm not delusional. I'm not unreliable. I'm a survivor of systematic abuse who was silenced by a corrupt system designed to protect men like Adrian and his father. And I'm done being quiet. Rebecca's testimony was shorter, more fragmented, but no less powerful. She spoke about the gaslighting, the control, the way Adrian had convinced her own family that she was unstable so they'd commit her when she tried to leave him. I lost 3 years of my life, Rebecca said, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 years locked away while he moved on to his next victim. But if speaking now means he can't do this to anyone else, then it was worth it. After they finished, Dr. Chen provided written statements corroborating their accounts, documentation of their admissions, and copies of the financial records showing the Wolf-connected trust paying for their care. This is explosive, Marco said when Leora showed him the footage that evening. With Mara's recordings and this testimony, we have a pattern of abuse and systematic cover-up. The Wolfs won't be able to dismiss this as one woman's vendetta. What about Cassidy's family? They're flying in for the gala. They want to confront Marcus Wolfe publicly about what happened to their daughter. Marco's expression was grim. Dante's been coordinating with them. They're bringing their own evidence, the trust fund records, emails from Cassidy expressing fear about Adrian, everything they have. It's really happening, Leora said quietly. We're really going to do this. We are. Which means it's time for you to come home. The gala is in 7 days. We need to prepare. Make sure security is airtight. Rehearse your statement. Marco's phone buzzed and his expression darkened as he read the message. Leora, we need to leave. Now. What's wrong? One of my contacts just spotted someone asking about you at the library where Mara works. They're in Portland. They're close. He was already moving, grabbing Leora's bag and ushering her toward the door. We have a car waiting at the back entrance. We're taking you straight to the airport. Leora's heart hammered as they rushed through the building and out into the alley. A black sedan waited, engine running. Marco practically shoved her into the back seat and climbed in beside her. Go, he barked at the driver. They pulled out into traffic, Marco constantly checking his phone and the rearview mirror. Leora found herself doing the same, searching for any sign of Adrian or his people. Did they find Mara? She asked. No, she's safe. But they're definitely looking for connections to you. It's only a matter of time before they piece together that you were here. The airport was 20 minutes away. Every second felt like an eternity. Leora kept expecting to see Adrian's face, and every passing car kept waiting for the moment when everything would fall apart. They made it to the private terminal without incident. The same pilot from before was waiting, the plane already prepared for takeoff. Straight shot back home, Marco said. I'll be on the next commercial flight. Dante's expecting you within 3 hours. Thank you, Leora said, for everything. Thank me by staying alive long enough to see this through. Marco's expression softened slightly. You've done good work here, Leora. Better than I expected. Those women, you gave them hope. Don't waste it by taking unnecessary risks from here on out. The flight back felt longer than the flight out, every minute stretching as Leora replayed the past week in her mind. She'd gone to Portland hoping to find one witness. She was returning with 3 testimonies, documented evidence, and the beginning of a case that could bring down one of the city's most powerful families. But she was also returning to a man who'd been waiting, worrying, risking everything he'd built to protect her. The thought of seeing Dante again made something warm unfold in her chest, something she wasn't quite ready to examine too closely. The plane landed as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. A car was waiting on the tarmac, Vincent behind the wheel, his expression as unreadable as ever. "Miss Vance," he said with a slight nod. "Welcome back. Mr. Moretti is waiting at the house." The drive to the estate was familiar now, the winding coastal road that had once been a desperate escape now feeling almost like a homecoming. When the iron gates came into view, Leora felt something in her chest relax. The gates swung open as they approached, and there, standing on the front steps of the main house, was Dante. He didn't move as the car pulled up, didn't rush forward or demand explanations. He just stood there, waiting, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made Leora's breath catch. She got out of the car, and for a moment, they just looked at each other across the distance. Then Dante moved, closing the gap between them in a few long strides. "You're back," he said, his voice rough. "I promised I would be." Without warning, Dante pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. Leora stiffened for just a moment. 3 years with Adrian had taught her to fear sudden movements, unexpected touches. But this was different. This was safety, warmth, the bone-deep relief of coming home. She wrapped her arms around him and held on. "Don't do that again," Dante murmured into her hair. "Don't put yourself at risk like that. When Marco called and said Adrian's people were in Portland, He stopped, pulled back to look at her. "You're important to me. More important than I expected. I need you to be safe." "I am safe. I'm here." Leora looked up at him, seeing something in his expression that made her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "And I brought back everything we need to finish this. Tell me." They went inside to Dante's office where Marco was already waiting via video call. Leora laid out everything. Mara's evidence, the video testimonies, Dr. Chen's documentation, the commitment from Cassidy Morrison's family. By the time she finished, both men were staring at her with something like awe. "This is more than I hoped for," Dante said quietly. "This is enough to destroy them." "But we need to be smart about how we use it," Marco added. "The gala is in 7 days. That gives us time to coordinate everything, make sure all our witnesses are protected, ensure the media coverage is locked down." "What about security?" Leora asked. "The Wolves will have people at the gala. The moment I show up..." "You won't be alone." Dante's voice was firm. "You'll walk in with me, and I'll have my best people positioned throughout the venue. If Marcus or Adrian try anything, they'll find themselves very quickly outmaneuvered." "Are you sure you want to do this?" Leora looked between them. "Once we go public, once we make this stand, there's no going back. The Wolves will come after all of us. Let them try." Dante's expression was cold, dangerous. "I've spent years watching corrupt men hide behind their badges and titles. I'm done watching. It's time they learned that power has limits." The next 7 days passed in a blur of preparation. Marco coordinated with lawyers to ensure every piece of evidence was documented and legally sound. Vincent ran security drills, planned exit strategies, prepared for every possible scenario. Elena helped Leora choose a dress for the gala, something elegant but strong, midnight blue that made her look fierce rather than fragile. And through it all, Dante was there. Planning, preparing, but also just present. They had dinner together every evening, conversations ranging from strategy to Shakespeare to silence that felt comfortable rather than heavy. Leora found herself seeking out his company, found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't thought possible. 3 days before the gala, Mara called. "I'm coming," she said without preamble. "I know I said I couldn't do it in person, but I've been thinking, if Emily and Rebecca can be brave enough to record their stories, if Cassidy's parents can face her killers, then I can stand on that stage with you." "Mara, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. I'm tired of hiding. And maybe, if my sister sees me standing up to them, she'll understand why I had to disappear, why I had to protect her." "Then we'll stand together," Leora said. "All of us." The night before the gala, Leora stood in the library, looking out at the dark ocean and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Tomorrow, she would walk into a room full of the city's elite and powerful, would look Adrian Wolf in the eye, and would tell the truth about what he was. She might be destroyed. She might be discredited, dismissed, or worse, but she would speak anyway. "Can't sleep?" Leora turned to find Dante in the doorway, Still dressed from dinner earlier. Too much on my mind. He crossed to stand beside her at the window. Second thoughts? Thousands of them, but I'm not backing down. I know you're not. Dante was quiet for a moment. Leora, after tomorrow, everything changes. Win or lose, your life will never be the same. Are you ready for that? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She looked up at him. Why did you really help me, Dante? And don't say it's because I asked. There's more to it than that. Dante's jaw tightened. I told you about my mother, about how she tried to escape my father and failed. What I didn't tell you is that I was the one who was supposed to protect her that second time. She made me promise to take my sister and run, to not look back no matter what happened. And I did. I ran. I saved my sister, but I left my mother behind and she died because of it. That wasn't your fault? I know. Logically, I know that. But it doesn't change the fact that I've spent 20 years wondering if things could have been different. If I'd been stronger, braver, if I'd fought back instead of running. He turned to face her fully. So when you showed up at my gates, when I saw the same fear in your eyes that I saw in my mother's, I made a different choice. I chose to fight. For you, yes. But also for her. For the chance I never got to protect someone who needed it. Leora felt tears prickling at her eyes. Without thinking, she reached up and cupped his face with her hand. You saved me, Dante. You gave me a chance to fight back. That's more than anyone else has ever done. Dante covered her hand with his own, his eyes intense. Tomorrow, when you walk into that ballroom, you're not going to be alone. I'll be right beside you. And if the wolves try anything, I know you'll protect me. Leora smiled slightly. But Dante, I don't need you to protect me anymore. I need you to stand with me. There's a difference. Then that's what I'll do. He leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. We'll face them together, and we'll watch their empire burn. They stood like that for a long moment, two people who'd both lost too much finding strength in each other. Tomorrow would bring war, but tonight they had this, a quiet moment of peace before the storm. And it was enough. The morning of the gala dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through Leora's windows and painting everything gold. She stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The midnight blue dress Elena had chosen fit perfectly, elegant and strong, with long sleeves that covered the fading scars on her arms. Her hair was styled simply, pulled back to reveal her face rather than hide behind it. She looked like someone who could walk into a room full of powerful people and demand they listen. She looked like a survivor. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Come in. Dante entered, and for a moment he just stopped and stared. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that made him look every inch the powerful man he was, but it was the expression on his face that took Leora's breath away. Pride, admiration, and something deeper that neither of them had named yet. You look remarkable, he said quietly. I look terrified. That too. But you wear it well. He crossed to her, holding out a small box. I have something for you. Inside was a delicate necklace, a simple silver chain with a small pendant shaped like a phoenix rising from flames. Rebirth, Dante said as he fastened it around her neck. You died in that storm and came back stronger. Tonight, you rise from the ashes of what they tried to make you and show them who you really are. Leora touched the pendant, feeling its weight against her skin. What if I freeze? What if I get up there and can't speak? Then I'll speak for you, or Mara will, or we'll play the video testimonies and let them do the talking. But Leora, he turned her to face him. You won't freeze. I've watched you over these past weeks. You've found your voice again. You're not going to lose it now. A text buzzed on Dante's phone. He glanced at it and nodded. Mara just arrived. She's waiting downstairs with Marco. Are you ready? Leora took one last look at herself in the mirror, at the woman she'd become in the weeks since that desperate run through the storm. As ready as I'll ever be. The ballroom of the Grandview Hotel was everything Leora had imagined, and worse. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over hundreds of guests in evening wear, all of them powerful, connected, exactly the kind of people who'd kept the Wolf's secrets for years. A stage dominated one end of the room, set up for the evening speakers and presentations. Camera crews from local news stations lined the walls, ready to broadcast the event. And there, Near the front of the room, standing with a group of city officials and looking every inch the respected public servant, was Marcus Wolf. Tall, silver-haired, distinguished, the kind of man people instinctively trusted. Beside him, laughing at something a councilwoman had said, was Adrian. Leora's steps faltered the moment she saw him. 3 years since she'd left, but he looked exactly the same, golden hair perfectly styled, that charming smile that had fooled her so completely, the easy confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. He was holding a glass of champagne, his other hand resting possessively on the arm of a young woman who couldn't have been more than 23. The next victim. The thought hit Leora like a physical blow. Dante's hand tightened on her arm. Breathe. You don't have to look at him. But Leora couldn't look away, because in that moment, seeing Adrian with another woman, another target, she felt something shift inside her. The fear that had been her constant companion for 3 years began to transform into something else, something fierce and burning and absolutely unafraid. He's already moved on, she said quietly. Already found someone new to hurt. Not for long, Mara said from behind them. She'd arrived with Marco dressed in simple black, her face set with determination. After tonight, that girl will know exactly what he is. They all will. The 4 of them, Leora, Dante, Mara, and Marco, made their way through the crowd. Leora felt eyes tracking them, heard the whispers start. Dante Moretti rarely attended these kinds of events, and when he did, people noticed. His presence here, with Leora on his arm, was already causing speculation. Vincent appeared at their side, speaking quietly into Dante's ear. Cassidy Morrison's parents just arrived. They're in position near the stage. Dr. Chen is here as well, with video testimony queued up. Everything's ready. Good. Dante's voice was calm, but Leora could feel the tension in his body. What about the Wolves? They haven't noticed Miss Vance yet, but it's only a matter of time. That time came exactly 3 minutes later. Leora was accepting a glass of water from a passing waiter when she felt it, that familiar prickle of awareness that came from being watched. She turned and found herself looking directly into Adrian's eyes across the crowded room. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Leora watched emotions flicker across Adrian's face, shock, disbelief, rage, and finally that cold calculation she knew so well. His hand tightened on his companion's arm hard enough to make the girl wince. Then he smiled, that charming public smile that didn't reach his eyes, and started walking toward them. Leora. Dante's voice was low, steady. Remember what we planned. You don't have to speak to him. But Leora found she wanted to, needed to, because this time she wasn't running. This time she had the power. Adrian stopped a few feet away, his smile never faltering even as his eyes burned with fury. Leora. What a surprise. I've been so worried about you. I'm sure you have. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. You disappeared so suddenly. I've had people searching everywhere. Your family will be relieved to know you're safe. He glanced at Dante, his expression flickering with barely concealed contempt. Though I'm surprised at the company you're keeping now. I would have thought you'd have better judgment than to associate with criminals. Funny, Leora said. I was just thinking the same thing about the 3 years I spent with you. Adrian's smile tightened. Behind him, Marcus Wolf had noticed the confrontation and was making his way over, his expression stern with manufactured concern. Leora, dear, you're clearly not well, Adrian said, his tone shifting to that patronizing gentleness that used to make her doubt her own sanity. Why don't we go somewhere quiet and talk? I can help you get the treatment you need. I don't need treatment. I need you and your father to answer for what you've done. What I've done? Adrian laughed, the sound perfectly calibrated for the growing audience around them. Leora, sweetheart, I think your memory is confused. I took care of you, loved you, and this is how you repay me, by running off with, by escaping, Leora interrupted, her voice ringing clear. By running for my life when you tried to kill me that night in the storm. The murmurs around them grew louder. Marcus Wolf reached them, his hand landing on Adrian's shoulder in a gesture that looked fatherly but was clearly meant to silence him. Miss Vance, Marcus said smoothly, I understand you've been through a difficult time. My son has told me about your struggles with mental health. If you need help, we can arrange. I don't need your help. I need you to stop lying. Leora looked around at the gathered crowd, at the cameras that were starting to turn their way. I need everyone here to know what you are, what your son is, what you've both been doing for years. This is harassment, Marcus said, his voice hardening. Security. Touch her, and you'll regret it. Dante's voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. Around them, Leora saw Vincent and several other men moving into position, their presence a subtle but unmistakable threat. The ballroom had gone almost silent now, everyone watching the confrontation unfold. The master of ceremonies approached, looking flustered. Perhaps we should all take a moment to calm down. An excellent idea, Marco said, appearing at the man's elbow. Why don't we move this to the stage? After all, this gala is about victims' rights, and Miss Vance has quite a story to share about being victimized. Marcus's expression went cold. This is not the appropriate venue. It's the perfect venue, Mara said, stepping forward. Her voice shook slightly, but she didn't back down. A gala honoring justice, hosted by the DA's office. Where better to expose how that office has been covering up crimes for years? Adrian's mask finally slipped, his handsome face twisting with rage. Mara, I should have known you'd be involved in this. Still bitter about how things ended between us. Still traumatized by what you did to me, Mara shot back. Still furious that your father threatened my sister to keep me quiet, but not quiet anymore. The crowd was murmuring louder now, phones coming out to record, news cameras swiveling to capture everything. Marcus Wolf looked around, clearly calculating his options, and seemed to realize he was trapped. If he tried to shut this down forcibly, it would look like suppression. If he let it play out, he risked exposure. Either way, he was losing control of the narrative. Fine, he said finally, his voice tight. If Miss Vance wants to make wild accusations in front of the entire city, let her, but she should be prepared for the consequences of slander. I'm not worried about slander, Leora said, because everything I'm about to say is true, and I have proof. Marco was already moving, coordinating with the AV team. Within minutes, the stage was set. Leora stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, some curious, some skeptical, some already sympathetic. The cameras were rolling live, broadcasting to every major news outlet in the city. And there, in the front row, sat Adrian and Marcus Wolf, their expressions carefully neutral, but their eyes burning with barely contained fury. Dante stood just off stage, close enough to reach her if needed. Mara was beside him, her face pale but determined. And in seats near the back, Leora could see Cassidy Morrison's parents, holding each other's hands and waiting for their moment to speak. Leora gripped the podium, her heart hammering so hard she could barely hear her own thoughts. For a moment, the old fear tried to rise up, tried to convince her she was making a mistake, that she should apologize and disappear before it was too late. Then she looked at Adrian, saw the cold confidence in his eyes, the certainty that she would break, that she would run just like all the others, and she began to speak. My name is Leora Vance. 3 years ago, I met a man named Adrian Wolf. He was charming, successful, everything I thought I wanted. I didn't know that I was walking into a carefully constructed trap. I didn't know that he was a predator who specialized in isolating vulnerable women and breaking them down until they had nothing left. The room was dead silent now. Adrian's smile had frozen on his face. For 3 years, Adrian controlled every aspect of my life. He cut me off from my friends, my family, my career. He convinced me I was unstable, that I needed him to survive. And when I tried to leave, when I questioned him, he hurt me. Not just emotionally, but physically. He broke my ribs once during an argument. He strangled me until I passed out. He locked me in rooms for days at a time to teach me lessons about obedience. Someone in the audience gasped. Adrian started to stand, but his father's hand on his shoulder forced him back down. And when I finally escaped, when I ran through a storm in bare feet because I'd rather die than spend one more night under his control, his father, District Attorney Marcus Wolf, tried to have me declared mentally incompetent, tried to use his position and power to drag me back to his son. Leora paused, letting her words sink in. Then she nodded to Marco. The screens behind her lit up with images, medical records from Dr. Chen documenting Leora's injuries, bank statements showing how Adrian had controlled her finances, emails and texts where he threatened her, manipulated her, gaslit her. But I'm not the first victim. I'm not even the fifth. Leora's voice grew stronger. Adrian Wolfe has a pattern of targeting vulnerable women, and when those women try to escape or expose him, his father uses his position as district attorney to silence them. The screen changed to show photos of other women. Cassidy Morrison, smiling and alive in pictures provided by her parents. Emily Sutton and Rebecca Glass, their faces somber as they stared into the camera. Mara Quinn, standing beside Leora now in solidarity. Cassidy Morrison dated Adrian 6 years ago. She tried to leave him. 3 months later, she disappeared. Her trust fund was liquidated, and the money ended up in accounts controlled by Marcus Wolfe's law firm. Her body has never been found. Cassidy's mother let out a sob. Her father stood, his face grief-stricken and furious. "My daughter was murdered, and this man covered it up." Security moved toward him, but Dante's men were faster, positioning themselves protectively. The cameras caught everything. Emily Sutton and Rebecca Glass both tried to press charges against Adrian, Leora continued. Both were institutionalized and labeled mentally ill before they could testify. Both have been locked away for 3 years, silenced and discredited, and both are ready to tell their stories now. The screen shifted to video testimony. Emily appeared first, her face calm and steady as she described her relationship with Adrian. The abuse? The way Marcus Wolfe had orchestrated her commitment to a psychiatric facility to keep her from testifying. Then Rebecca, her voice softer, but no less powerful, detailing the same pattern of abuse and systematic silencing. Adrian was on his feet now, his face flushed. "This is ridiculous. These women are clearly disturbed. My father and I have done nothing but try to help." "Help?" Mara's voice cut through his protest. She walked onto the stage, pulling a small recording device from her pocket. "Is this what you call help?" She pressed play. Marcus Wolfe's voice filled the ballroom, cold and threatening, as he described exactly what would happen to Mara's sister if she didn't recant her testimony. The recording was crystal clear, damning, undeniable. The crowd erupted. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Marcus Wolfe stood, his face ashen, trying to make his way toward the exit. But police officers, real ones, not ones on his payroll, were already moving in, directed by investigators who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "Marcus Wolfe, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to commit fraud," one of them announced, loud enough for the cameras to catch. Marcus's carefully constructed mask of respectability finally shattered. "This is a setup. These accusations are false. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," the officer continued, snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. Adrian tried to run. He actually turned and tried to push through the crowd, but Vincent and Marco were there blocking his path. More officers closed in. "Adrian Wolfe, you're under arrest for assault, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Additional charges pending investigation into the disappearance of Cassidy Morrison." "No!" Adrian's voice was shrill now, desperate. He looked around wildly, searching for anyone who would help him. His eyes landed on Leora, and for a moment she saw real fear there. "Leora, please, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Tell them the truth." Leora descended from the stage, walking toward him with her head held high. "That you're a monster who hides behind charm and family connections? That you've destroyed lives and felt no remorse? That you would have killed me if I hadn't run?" She stopped directly in front of him, close enough to see the panic in his eyes. "I am telling them the truth. Finally." Adrian lunged at her, breaking free from the officers for just a moment. But Dante was faster, stepping between them and catching Adrian's wrist in an iron grip. "Don't," Dante said quietly, his voice deadly calm. "Give me an excuse, please." For a moment, the two men faced each other. Then Adrian seemed to crumple, all his charm and confidence draining away as the officers pulled him back and secured the handcuffs. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Reporters shouting questions, guests talking over each other, cameras flashing. But Leora barely heard any of it. She was watching Adrian being led away in handcuffs, Marcus Wolfe shouting about his lawyers and his rights, both of them finally facing consequences. Mara appeared at her side, tears streaming down her face. "We did it. We actually did it." "You did it," Cassidy Morrison's mother said, approaching them with her husband. "You gave my daughter a voice when we thought she'd been silenced forever." "Thank you." More people came forward. Women who'd heard rumors about Adrian but never felt safe speaking up. prosecutors who'd suspected Marcus Wolf's corruption but lacked proof, survivors of other crimes who'd been dismissed by the DA's office. The floodgates had opened, and everything the Wolves had buried was finally coming to light. Through it all, Dante stayed close to Leora's side, a steady presence in the chaos. When the reporters became too aggressive, he and Vincent created a protective barrier. When Leora's legs started to shake from adrenaline crash, he was there to steady her. "We need to get you out of here," he said quietly. "This is going to get worse before it gets better." But Leora shook her head. "Not yet. I need to see them taken away. I need to know it's really over." So they stayed, watching as Adrian and Marcus were led out of the hotel in handcuffs, cameras documenting every moment. The young woman Adrian had brought to the gala, his next intended victim, watched with wide, terrified eyes, perhaps realizing how close she'd come to being the next Leora, the next Emily, the next name on a list of broken women. It was only after the police cars had driven away, after the crowd had begun to disperse, and the reporters had filed their stories, that Leora finally allowed herself to collapse. Dante caught her, lifting her into his arms without a word and carrying her out through a back entrance where Marco had a car waiting. The drive back to the estate passed in a blur. Leora was dimly aware of Mara in the seat beside her, of Marco on the phone coordinating with lawyers and investigators, of Vincent driving with his usual calm efficiency. But mostly she was aware of Dante's arm around her shoulders, keeping her grounded, keeping her safe. By the time they reached the estate, the first news reports were already breaking. Every major outlet was running the story. District Attorney and son arrested on multiple charges. Video testimonies expose systematic abuse and cover-up. Victims come forward after years of silence. The Wolf's empire was crumbling in real time, every news cycle bringing new revelations, new victims, new evidence of their crimes. Elena met them at the door, her expression fierce with pride. "You are magnificent, all of you. Come. I've prepared rooms for Miss Quinn and food for everyone." But Leora couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't do anything but pace the library and watch the news coverage roll in. The story was everywhere. International outlets were picking it up. Social media was exploding with support for the victims and outrage at the corruption. And through it all, more women kept coming forward. Women Adrian had dated briefly before moving on. Women who'd worked with Marcus Wolf and witnessed his corruption. Women who'd tried to report crimes only to have their cases buried by the DA's office. The pattern was undeniable, overwhelming, devastating. "They're saying Marcus will be disbarred," Marco reported around midnight. "The state attorney general has already announced an investigation into every case his office has handled in the last 20 years. And Adrian," he paused. "They found evidence at his apartment, photos of women, including ones who were reported missing. The investigation into Cassidy Morrison's death has been reopened as a homicide case." Leora closed her eyes, feeling grief wash over her. Cassidy had been so close to escaping, so close to freedom, and instead, she'd paid the ultimate price for trying to stop a monster. "We got justice for her," Mara said quietly. She'd been sitting silently in the corner, processing everything. "It doesn't bring her back, but at least her family knows the truth now. At least Adrian will answer for what he did." The next few days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media interviews, and coordinating with prosecutors. Leora gave her official statement to investigators, every detail she could remember about her 3 years with Adrian. Emily and Rebecca were released from the psychiatric facility, their commitments deemed fraudulent and coerced. Dr. Chen testified before a grand jury about the systematic abuse of the mental health system to silence victims. And slowly, the full scope of the Wolf's corruption emerged. Marcus had been running protection rackets for 15 years, using his office to extort business owners and silence anyone who threatened his power. Adrian had attacked at least 8 women over the course of a decade, with 3 deaths now being investigated as potential homicides. Their network of enablers, lawyers, judges, police officers who'd looked the other way, began to unravel as people rushed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Through it all, Leora stayed at the estate, processing, healing, trying to figure out what came next. The woman who'd collapsed at these gates 5 weeks ago felt like a different person. That woman had been broken, terrified, convinced she had no power. This woman had stood on a stage in front of the entire city and exposed the men who'd tried to destroy her. She was sitting in the library one evening watching the sunset paint the ocean gold when Dante found her. "The prosecutor called," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "They're offering Adrian a plea deal, life in prison without parole in exchange for testimony against his father and the others in their network. Will he take it?" "His lawyers are recommending it. The evidence against him is overwhelming. If he goes to trial, he'll likely face the death penalty for Cassidy's murder." Dante's voice was quiet. "It's over, Leora. Really over. They're never getting out." Leora let that sink in. Over. Adrian would spend the rest of his life in prison. Marcus would die behind bars. Their empire of corruption and abuse had been completely dismantled. The women they'd hurt finally had justice. So why didn't she feel more victorious? "What's wrong?" Dante asked, reading her expression. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel different. Triumphant or relieved or something. But mostly I just feel empty." She looked at him. "What do I do now? This fight has consumed me for weeks. And now that it's over, I don't know who I am without it." Dante reached over and took her hand, his touch warm and solid. "Now you rebuild. You figure out who Leora Vance is when she's not running or fighting or surviving. You live. I don't even know how to do that anymore." "Then you learn, and you don't have to do it alone." He paused. "Unless you want to. The offer still stands. New identity, new city, fresh start somewhere far from here. I can arrange it all if that's what you need." Leora realized she was still wearing the lighthouse bracelet he'd given her. She touched it, remembering what he'd said, a safe harbor to return to. "What if I don't want to leave?" Dante's expression shifted, hope flickering in his dark eyes. "Then you stay, for as long as you want. This is your home, Leora, for as long as you need it to be." "And what about you?" The question came out softer than she intended. "Where do you fit in this new life I'm supposed to build?" "Wherever you want me to." Dante's voice was rough, vulnerable in a way she'd rarely heard. "I told you before, you're important to me. More important than I expected. These past weeks, having you here, fighting beside you, watching you become the woman you were always meant to be, I don't want that to end." "I'm still broken," Leora said quietly. "Still healing. I don't know if I'm ready for... I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I'm just saying that whenever you are ready, if you are ready, I'm here. And if you're never ready, if you decide you need to find your own path without me, I'll accept that too." "Your choice, Leora. Always your choice." Leora looked at this man who'd opened his gates to a stranger, who'd risked everything to help her fight back, who'd stood beside her without demanding anything in return. Dante Moretti was a contradiction, feared by the city's underworld, but capable of profound gentleness, powerful enough to destroy empires, but choosing instead to build sanctuaries, and somewhere along the way, she'd fallen for him. "I choose to stay," she said, "not because I need protection or have nowhere else to go, but because this feels like home. Because you feel like home." Dante's breath caught. "Leora, I'm not ready for everything yet," she continued. "I need time to heal, to figure out who I am, but I want to do that here, with you." The smile that spread across Dante's face was genuine, transformative. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Leora let herself sink into the embrace. This was different from the desperate clinging of the night she'd arrived. This was choice. This was trust. This was the beginning of something new. 3 months later, Leora stood in front of a modest building in downtown, looking up at the sign that read Haven House in simple letters. The building had been empty for years, but with funding from Dante's legitimate business ventures and donations from people who'd been moved by Leora's story, it had been transformed into a refuge for women escaping abusive situations. Mara stood beside her, holding the ribbon they were about to cut for the grand opening. "Are you ready?" "I think so." Leora looked at the small crowd that had gathered, reporters, supporters, and several women who'd already expressed interest in the program. Emily and Rebecca were there too, both of them working as counselors, using their experiences to help others heal. Dr. Chen had signed on as the medical director, providing psychiatric care and testimony in cases that went to court. And there, standing slightly apart but watching with unmistakable pride, was Dante. Thank you all for coming, Leora said, her voice steady and strong. Haven House exists because too many women don't have a safe place to run to when they need to escape. Too many victims are silenced by systems that should protect them. This place is different. Here, women will find safety, resources, and most importantly, belief. We will believe their stories, we will stand with them, and we will help them rebuild their lives on their own terms. She cut the ribbon and the crowd applauded. The first residents would move in next week. 3 women who'd escaped situations similar to Leora's, all of them ready to start healing. As the crowd dispersed and the tours began, Dante approached. This is incredible, what you've built here. What we've built, Leora corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You absolutely could have. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Leora Vance. Second strongest, she countered with a slight smile. Your mother fought her whole life. I just fought for a few weeks. My mother would have loved you. Dante's voice was soft. She would have been proud of what you've accomplished. They stood together, watching women tour the facility, imagining the lives that would be saved within these walls. The trial had concluded 2 weeks ago. Adrian sentenced to life without parole, Marcus to 35 years for his role in multiple crimes. Their network of enablers had been dismantled, replaced by prosecutors and officials committed to actual justice. The city was healing, and so was Leora. I've been thinking, she said, about what comes next. Haven House is important, but there's more work to do. More women who need help, more systems that need changing. What are you proposing? A foundation. Something bigger than just this building. We provide legal support for victims, fund investigations into corruption, offer relocation assistance for women who need to disappear. We become the resource I wish had existed when I was trapped. Dante studied her face. That's a massive undertaking. I know, but I can't do it alone. I'd need a partner, someone who understands power dynamics, who has resources and connections, who's willing to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. She looked at him directly. I'd need you. You already have me. Dante's expression was serious, committed. Whatever you need, wherever this goes, I'm with you. That evening, after the opening celebrations had ended and the guests had gone home, Leora and Dante stood on the cliffs behind the estate, looking out at the ocean. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. It reminded Leora of that first night, when she'd collapsed at the gates and Dante had made the choice to open them. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Helping me? Everything that came after? Not for a second. Dante turned to face her. You changed everything, Leora. My whole life, I've been trying to figure out how to use my power for something meaningful. You showed me how. By letting a half-dead woman into your house? By choosing compassion over convenience? By standing up to corruption even when it was dangerous? By proving that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open a door for someone who needs it? Leora leaned against him, feeling his arms come around her. Over the past months, they'd grown closer in careful increments. Shared meals turning into long conversations, casual touches becoming more deliberate. The space between them gradually closing as Leora healed and learned to trust again. I love you, she said quietly. The words felt momentous, terrifying, and absolutely right. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere between opening those gates and standing beside me through everything that followed, I fell in love with you. Dante's arms tightened around her. I love you too. Have for a while now. I was just waiting for you to be ready to hear it. I'm ready. Leora turned in his arms, looking up at him. For all of it. For love, for partnership, for building something meaningful together. I'm ready to stop just surviving and start actually living. Dante kissed her then, gentle and careful and full of promise. It was nothing like the desperate passion of movies. It was better. It was real, earned through weeks of trust building and respect, grounded in genuine understanding of who they both were. When they pulled apart, Leora was smiling, a real smile, unforced and genuine. So what do we do now? Now? Dante took her hand. Now we go inside, have dinner with Mara and Marco and Elena and everyone else who's become our strange little family. Tomorrow we start planning the foundation, figuring out how to help more women, changing more systems. And the day after that, we keep going, keep building, keep fighting for people who need it. That sounds perfect. They walked back toward the house together, hand in hand. The lights were on inside, warm and welcoming. Through the windows, Leora could see Elena setting the table, Marco gesturing animatedly as he told some story, Mara laughing at whatever he was saying. Home, family, safety, love. All the things she'd thought she'd lost forever, found again in the last place she'd expected. The gates that had once been her salvation now stood open, not because they had to be, but because Leora had chosen to open them. She'd spent 3 years trapped behind walls of control and fear. Now she was free, truly free, to build walls only when she wanted them and tear them down when she didn't. And standing beside her, holding her hand and promising to face whatever came next together, was a man who'd learned that real power wasn't about control or fear. It was about choosing when to show mercy, when to open doors, and when to stand beside someone and fight. The woman who'd run through that storm barefoot and terrified was gone. In her place stood Leora Vance, survivor, advocate, fighter, lover. A woman who'd looked her monsters in the eye and refused to blink. A woman who'd transformed her pain into purpose and her survival into salvation for others. The storm had ended. The war was won. And now, finally, she could rest in the peace she'd fought so hard to claim. As they reached the door, Dante paused and looked at her. No regrets? Leora touched the lighthouse pennant at her neck, the phoenix rising from flames, all the symbols of the journey that had brought her here. Then she looked at the man beside her, the house full of people who'd become her chosen family, and the future that stretched out before them full of possibility. Not a single one, she said. And together, they walked inside.